Welcome back to me and Mike's podcast. We still don't have a name. We still don't. So the plan with the name is we're trying to figure a name out. At first, I was thinking maybe we go with something mythological. But it could really be anything. If you guys have any suggestions, you could leave them in chat right now. You can comment when we post it on YouTube or even on our Spotify. And going forward now with the show, we figured out how we're going to bring you to the show. So every Wednesday around 3:30-ish, it's going to be on my Twitch channel live. And then after it airs on my Twitch channel, it'll be on Mike's YouTube channel. So make sure you check that out. What's your YouTube, Mike?
It's at PBM Smite.
At PBM Smite. And then if you are interested in listening to it on Spotify, it'll be on Inside the SPL on Spotify. So that's the plan with the episodes going forward. But back to the name, we're still trying to figure it out.
Yeah, we're still trying to consider options and kind of talk through. Like, nothing's really just hit us to where we're like, oh my gosh, like, yes, we got to do that. But we do have a couple that we like, so we might, give it like a week or so. And if we're between like 2 or 3, we'll just do a vote for it over like maybe a couple weeks or something.
Yeah, if one really sticks out and we really like him, we're like, this has to be the name, we're going to go with it. But if we don't find anything that we're like, this has to be it, we're going to leave it up to a vote. We have 2 names right now that we like and that we could think it could be a good podcast name. But we'll just leave that quiet now until we go for the vote, and then people can see that then.
Yeah. You ready?
Yeah.
All right, cool. So heading into today, we're really excited. You guys might have noticed the extra chair. We'll have our first guest on the podcast. And this episode is going to be about kind of different perspectives within Smite, how, a changing of scenery, a changing of perspectives really lets you look at the game or look at the scene through a new angle. Something that we're really excited to do on this podcast in general is explore things behind the scenes that you might not really think about. So, the day in the life of an admin or of a coach, that type of thing, where there might be some sort of misconception between what a coach actually does on a team and what you think they do. And we thought a perfect guest for that would be Kabam. Kabam is someone who's been playing Smite, been around the scene for over a decade. He's played professionally with Aror. He's coached both of us. He's been in admin 2 different occasions, once in season 7 and now from season 9 moving forward, season 10. So we're really excited to be joined by Kabam. And yeah, unfortunately, no Munch today, though,
No Munch.
Which is what everybody knows best, but we'll settle.
What do you mean?
Well, it's like a good settle, though. Like, we're happy to be settling down with you.
I'm like the person you meet like after you got through a bad breakup and you're like, I
Make
don't want
sure you're talking to your mic.
Oh yeah. So I'm like the person you meet after like a bad breakup and you're like, I don't want to go through that again.
Well,
And then you like stick with me, right? That's what you're saying.
no, it's like the grass seemed greener, and then you realize it wasn't, and then you go back to the grass
so
that was actually
familiar.
green. And you go back to the grass that was actually the greenest.
What is even happening right now?
I don't know.
I don't even know what's going on.
Oh
We're
my
doing work
gosh.
with grass.
But yeah, no, I'm really happy to. Thanks for coming on, by the
Yeah.
way. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for having me. I was already here working, so it just made a little bit of sense, I suppose.
Nice, yeah. Yeah, carve out a few hours,
Yeah,
Go down memory
these are
lane.
billable hours, to be clear.
Oh, that's beautiful. We
That's
love
awesome.
that. Yeah. Yeah, we all do our normal workday, little scrims into this. How were scrims today? Obviously, you can't say anything.
They're
Yeah.
great.
Nice. We
Yeah.
had fun as well,
Nice.
so we love that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm so familiar with both of those mean. So, that's good.
So I guess if you wouldn't mind just a little bit, for those of you who, maybe don't know Kabam, maybe just a brief introduction, like how did you get into Smite, when you first got in the competitive scene, that type of stuff.
I first got into Smite. I had a friend who we went to PAX East because the girl I was dating at the time really wanted to go, and we saw the booth for it.
Okay.
And he was super into Heroes of New Earth, I think it was called.
Yeah, I know that game.
And we played WoW a lot together, and he just saw it, and he was like, I've got to get into this. And I wasn't super interested because when I tried Heroes of New Earth, I like hated myself. It made me really unhappy, so I wasn't going to play that. But he got a free code, and he was like, come play with me. And I tried it. And I remember my first game was like Ymir, and I was like, I can move like WoW, but I couldn't. I was like walling myself and killing my teammates. I got to the end of the game and I was like, that was sick. So I was like, yeah, I'm gonna stick with that.
Yeah, that moving like WoW that's what brought me into the game so much, because I feel like we're all WoW players at heart, right?
Yeah. I was playing WoW a lot back then, and then for comp, I think I started getting into it. It was with you when I started playing. I tried playing on a bunch of like random teams with people, and it was just like always like me and like 4 like platheads.
How far back was this like season 0?
Yeah, these were like the weekly tournaments.
Okay.
I just had these like super awful plat players. I was just like Poseidon 1v9.
Nice.
And no, I'd get to like I'd get like 2 games in, and then I would just get stomped by like tier 3 esport team. And then I got on Auror's team, and we were pretty good.
This is pre-Fat Chunks though.
Yes.
So, okay.
This is literally in season 0. So going into that, me and Mike. So this is when you first met me and played with me. What was like your first impression of playing with me?
I was like, I don't know if this guy's like super smart and he knows more than everyone in the world, or if I'm getting taken for a ride. I remember that being my first impression, because he was like back then, like we weren't even like really like jungling. Like, so he was like Arachne, like actually like killing jungle. I was like, that's weird. And then he was like, I'm gonna play Fenrir into Wukong, and Wukong had his like knock up on his 2 and stuff, and he was like the OP guy, and he's like, guys, you have to trust me, Fenrir's OP into Wukong. We were like, okay. And stuff like that. And then, you know, it was interesting. He was always ahead of stuff. But
that checks out.
People that are always ahead of stuff, you know, sometimes
takes you a bit to...
people are just like, no.
Yeah, you just don't understand
silly.
it yet.
Yeah, it's crazy because so there's a couple people that have played with me as jungle and support, because I was jungle back then as well. I wasn't even a support player. So I was a jungler back then. I didn't swap to support until like later in season 0.
Yeah, it was Triptych. Triptych made you swap.
Yeah, was it?
It was Triptych. Yeah. Triptych made you swap. Triptych was so bad at support, you said, I'm so sick of having bad supports. And then you swapped.
Oh, I thought this was like a good idea. Triptych was like, yeah, I think you'd be really good at support.
No. Triptych was so bad that Aror was like, I can't do this anymore.
Because this other support would just always show up at mid camps on the other team.
And our guy would not. He wouldn't leave me alone ever.
And it'd be so if that I would just be the jungler at mids, and then their support would be there, and then it'd be 3v2, and I would just die every single time. And I'm like, if no one's going to do it, I'm just going to do it myself.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was good. That was good stuff. It was me, Aror, this guy named Triptych, Nero.
Me and Nero didn't get along, I remember.
We did not like Nero, and Chaos.
Yeah.
And Chaos ended up being our solo laner, I think. And he played Ra.
Nice.
I knew Chaos forever, actually, which is crazy because you didn't even know this. We really want to have Chaos on in the future, so I guess we shouldn't touch about it too much. But yeah, I played with him, and then Chaos also played with me with my original crew as well back in season 0, which is funny.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it was tough stuff.
Yeah, you had mentioned. Well, it's kind of funny that WoW was such a big, like the movement of it.
Yeah.
Was so attractive to all of us because I am not like a top-down gamer. Like my brain just cannot process it at all. Were there any other games, maybe like RPGs or something like that you also felt like Smite reminded you of? Like for me, for example, I used to play a lot of like just random games, like even like Skyrim or something, and I just kind of like the mythology / like, I guess, is it like medieval fantasy? I don't even know what to call it, but like I just think stuff like that's cool. I'm not like a big like future gamer, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Like fantasy, medieval, those types of things.
Yeah.
I was kind of the similar. I played a lot of like hack and slash action games. So I play like, I think back then it was like Darksiders. There was like Dante's Inferno, God of War, and those games I always really liked because I felt like when I pressed the button, I got like an immediate feedback. And I think that was the difference for like when I'm playing like a top-down game, like any other like MOBA, versus like Smite. I feel like when I press the button, I get like really good feedback. And I know like, you know, sometimes when people like lag in Smite, they like complain a lot about how like things feel really disjointed, and that's because it feels so clean when you're playing it that when something goes wrong, you really, really feel it. So whenever I got the feedback in the game and I hit something and it sounded good and I felt like I really did something good, like that's how I knew I was really into the game.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. You also liked. I know you're a big fan of like the Yeez franchise too.
Yeez, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeez.
Yeez. Has there been any of those games that come out recently?
They're
or
still
no?
coming out every 2 years.
Yeah. Are
Yeah.
you still in it or what?
I am. I played the most recent one. It was good. It was everything I needed to be.
Nice.
Yeah, I just.
And I remember when we were at the beach house, which we'll get into later. We were playing Persona. I remember every day I would just hear Persona every time I woke up. You beat Persona 5,
I beat
right?
the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I beat the whole thing while we were there.
That was sick. But
that was probably tough for everyone else. But
Wait, so when did both of you get into the SPL at the same time? Because I played, my first year was Season 2, and I remember playing against both of you, and you were Hunter at the time for COG. Was that your first time in SPL? I actually don't know.
it was my first time in SPL. I would be like a top 4 team in the SEC equivalent.
Okay. Was it so? It was weekly tournaments back then, right? For like Challenger Cup, is that what it was called? I think that when I started Season 2, that's what it was.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was weekly tournaments. I think it was long. It was kind of similar to the format now, where it was like weekly tournaments into like a closed bracket.
Oh, okay.
But I think the closed bracket was just relegations. Like you didn't actually do a closed bracket.
Oh.
So it was like you just play. There was point. I remember that I didn't know anything about it. I never read a blog post. I never read anything from anyone. I was literally the person I hate now. But I always had like a captain whose sole purpose on the team, they would be like the worst player on the team by a lot. But they read stuff. So we
Nice.
kept them.
That's really good.
you get gems as well, I'm pretty sure, from playing in those.
You did get gems, and I think I remember it was so funny. I won my first like weekly thing, and I got like $100, and I'm just like in a hot tub in Florida, and I'm like, yeah, I made it. This is the start of something good. I made it, and then I got it like 5 months later.
Yeah, that's sick. So going back to Season 0, because we were on that team, right, for a little bit.
The honeybees, yeah.
The honeybees, yeah.
Yeah.
And what did you do after that team? Because I think we talked a little bit and played like a little bit with each other. Because I think you played in some of the in-houses that I used to do like randomly with like random people with like Divios and just random players. But
I went super streamer mode because that's when I started dating Renee.
yeah,
So I had a year-long period where I was basically Shaywaz. I would log on and play one game a day, and it was always a Cupid game.
Oh my god.
And it was in between like my classes. I had like an hour block. I would log in, I would play Cupid in a casual, and I had like the worst build. I had like Soul Eater first, and like boots and XC, and I never built crit item ever. I was a crit hater.
Was that the Aura Soul Eater?
Yeah, it was like a lifesteal aura.
Oh my gosh.
It was like the worst item ever, but it was like a little skull.
Yeah.
Little skull with like some green on it. And that's all I would do. I'd log on and do that. And then when I started getting back into it, I started like streaming a lot. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll be a streamer. I hated streaming, so I stopped.
you were doing pretty well though for a little bit.
for that
You were
time on
killing
Twitch,
it.
I was owning.
You had the famous Kabam picture of your chair as your Twitch.
Oh yeah.
Your Twitch picture. That's what I remember.
Yeah,
of your black chair, just as your Twitch picture.
Oh man. Yeah, those were different times. And then we started talking again because he would invite me to do these like weekly tournaments, and he had me sub for Zap that one time.
Oh yeah, you played. So you played in. Was it the first week of SPL? So that was actually your first week SPL because we played against
Enemy.
I think
It was
Enemy,
Jerby, Soulshiner,
Awesome to the Max,
Awesome to the Max.
Well,
Vedium.
This is a
Vedium,
throwback
yeah.
squad. My goodness.
and I forget who else.
Was it not Pain?
No, we're missing a solo laner.
Was it Maddie?
No, Awesome to the Max was a solo.
Awesome to the Max.
Vedium.
It wasn't Maddie.
It was Maddie.
Yeah,
it
was
was
it
Maddie.
Maddie? Okay.
It was Maddie. Yeah,
Yeah.
Maddie Pocket. Yeah, no, and then I remember
We owned as well that week.
we did own that week. Yeah.
Funny story too. If we ever have Zap on, Zap was so mad when Kabam owned because Zap back then would always be like, "Oh my God, he's not even that good" or whatever. 'Cause Zap would always get mad at Oceans for like the same thing in like season. Was that season
Three, I
three
think,
when he
yeah.
crit?
Yeah.
He crit.
He
With,
crit Cyclone twice.
Yeah, and Zap's
Yeah.
like, "That's so stupid," and everybody just thinks he's the best player. It was so funny. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I do remember I was like subbing for scrims and we were like playing and Zap popped in. I remember him saying something like, "You guys are just like talking a little too much. It sounds a little cluttered." I was like, "Oh, I don't know what's going on." Because I was asking a bunch of questions because I didn't know what the hell to do. I was with a bunch of people I never played with, and they were really good. So
move the mic up a little bit.
So I wanted to like learn a bit. So I was just asking a bunch of questions. I guess it made it loud. Yeah, no, it was fun though. I had like the best KDA in SPL for like a year.
Oh, I do remember that actually. Yeah, that's good stuff.
He went nuclear that weekend when we won both games. I think. Right? Who else did we play against?
It was just them.
Was it just enemy?
Yeah, but I remember it was the funniest play ever, and this is the most lastest thing you're ever gonna hear. Right? I'm playing Neath, and he's of course Blink Poseidon, and he's like chasing down Awesome to the max. And I'll never forget. He's like, charge your ult, charge your ult, charge your ult. I'm gonna blink. And he's like, he blinks and I ult him. He's like, yes. And he just crackens off my ult. I was like, all right, yeah.
Dude, playing with glasses
like,
was so
who
funny.
does that, man? He's just screaming at me. You're like, fuck yeah. I was like, all right. Yeah, it was good. That was good stuff. Yeah, I mean, and then after that, I just went back to streaming.
So when you guys had played together in season 2, you already had experience playing with one another. Can you kind of like, was it different playing with Max in the SPL compared to season 0 or whatever?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it was different because I remember
I was jungle for one as well too, so it was a lot different.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was tough too because I don't think I realized it at the time. And there are some players like me, but a lot of them have been filtered out because they're like not in the SPL anymore. But like my super stretch goal for Smite was like, I just want to play professionally, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I got it, and I was like, I don't know how much better I'm gonna get, right? Like I wasn't like my goal. I wasn't one of those people like I hit SPL and I was like, now I gotta win Worlds. I was like, I did it. So like it wasn't that like I stopped trying, but I didn't try the same way. Like,
you just didn't have a new like goal. You didn't have something like pushing you.
I just didn't feel like I would be able to get much farther than that, and it became like weird for me, I guess. And it was also like I got brought on. I remember I was always role swapping. I was either a mid, an ADC, or a jungler all the time. And I got picked up for ADC, but when I was playing it, it was like I always picked the most broken role at the time. So I was playing ADC because we had like Sprint 3 and it was the Heartseeker start meta. So I was like gunning people down. And then I get into the SPL and it all gets removed.
Oh.
All of it got removed. So like the way I had been playing and like I was owning. Don't get me wrong, I was owning.
You were owning.
I couldn't do it anymore. I was suddenly not very good because I didn't have Sprint 3 Heartseeker 200 damage autos first item.
I've been through periods of a similar thing.
And I was like, I don't know what to do. But yeah, I mean, I'll never forget. It was so funny because we'd be playing and we would always be like doing pretty well. But the start of the game was always bad because for some reason I just would never hit the big creep, the pull the buff. I would hit the little creep and Aror just like, you just have to hit the big creep. And I'm like, I'm trying.
I had that with Meerkat. I played with Meerkat and he used to play Hoi and I'd be like, okay man, like we'll win this lane. All you have to do is line up the triple bounce. I'm like, if you just triple bounce the camp, we'll get there first. We'll win the lane. And he'd be like, yeah, I got it lined up. And then he would like turn his camera, he'd be like, oh, I fucked it.
and there goes my game.
Yeah, I'm like, it's okay, bud. You know?
For any of you guys trying to get into competitive, like the jungle clear at the start of the game is like the most important thing you can do.
It's
like,
not particularly close either.
Yeah, it really like dictates like your entire early game and like getting a lead in Smite. The thing I've always said is playing Smite from ahead is much easier than playing it from behind.
Very true.
Everything simplifies when you do that. So that's the whole point of clearing. So it's super important. But so fast forward after the Eager, when you subbed in, you were streaming a bunch. And then I think that's when I decided to step away from Eager. And that's when Mike actually got picked up. And then we made a team and we called it Fat Chunks Reassemble, right?
Yeah.
So it was me, Scary D, you, Neilma, and Kevin Bacon.
And then T Money after Kevin Bacon.
Yeah, and then T Money after Kevin Bacon. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we played in the Eager. like
The Eager Cup.
The Eager Cup.
We played in the Eager Cup, and we had one of like the weekly tournaments. We went against Denial, the team that would go to be Elevate, and then the Noble team at the time, and they were all like SEC or SPL caliber. And I had been up for 35 hours.
Oh my God.
He asked me, he was like, "You want to play?" I was like, "Dude, I haven't slept." And he was like, "Yeah, but like, do you want to play?" And I was like, "All right."
This was Kabam's demon phase right there.
Yeah, when I lived in Florida, I had no concept of time or reality. So
35 hours deep and just slamming people on the battleground.
And I was playing my patented X-Ball, to be clear.
Of course, no, you were an X-Ball main. We all know
my
that.
patented X-Ball. Yeah, that's what I mean. I had Sprint 3 and Heartseeker. I'm just literally just charging people down, gunning them.
And back then, his passive was off kills too, right?
Yeah.
So like, if you got ahead, you were like really snowballing.
And I was killing people.
Yeah, I believe it.
And we played a Denial in the finals, right?
Semifinals.
Oh, it was semifinals.
You got
okay.
Junipera in the finals. I remember that.
Yeah, okay. We
For
can
the
talk
uninitiated,
about that as
the Junipera was when the Geb would go into the side jungle and start the rollout, and then roll behind you and knock you into their side of the map.
and then you die.
And then you die.
And that's the Junipera.
And the worst part, like it was on stream, and we're like, I'm like, yo, like they're rolling out, they're gonna like hit you from the back, and he was like, yeah. And then he got hit. He was like, oh, I got hit in the back. I was like, yeah, that's right.
And then we ended up winning that set, I think, still, right?
Yeah, we won that set,
Yeah.
and then we also won the Eager Cup.
Yeah.
I remember because there was one game we were in like the finals, or whatever, and it like wasn't looking that good. And then like my heart bomb stunned 3 people.
Yes, dude. Yeah, it was. So your heart bomb. What god was our mid laner? What god was Kevin Bacon? Because we were playing with
He
Kevin
must
Bacon.
have been Janice.
He was. Yes, he was either Janice. I was thinking it was maybe Zeus, but your heart bomb stunned 3 people, and whatever mage he was, he just went like
He just
this with
one-shot
his
all of
kit,
them, yeah.
and it one shot all 3 of them. We literally won that game, and I think we won the tournament off that. And it was just so funny to think about, because I remember exactly, it was on the season 2 map, if for anybody that knows, and it was, we were at Fire, and you heart bombed someone like right around the corner, and then they ran around the corner like towards top side of mid camp,
Stunned all.
and it stunned their entire team. And then it was either Janice or Zeus who just went blah with his kit, and it just one shot like all 3 of them. And we won that tournament. And that's how Scary D got a computer, I remember, as well.
Oh
You got
yeah.
a computer off that tournament.
Yeah, because it was
That's
like a pretty big prize pool, I remember. And I told him if
And I think we some of us pulled money into it too from it.
yeah, I told him if we won, I gave him all of my prize pool so he could get a computer, because
That's
he
awesome.
had
I think it was 500 a pop, right?
it was
I think,
more than that. I think it was like 800 or 900 a pop. It was really good pricing. It was like the best tournament.
we all chipped in a bit, but you chipped in the most. And then I remember every single day I'd order food and I said lunch is on Steve.
I remember that.
Love that.
Yeah, but
That was a good
that tournament was a lot of fun. And then we played. Did we play? What did we play? We didn't play Challenger because we weren't in that, right? Or how did that work? I don't remember what else we played.
Oh, so what ended up happening was like a week or 2 after that tournament. David Fry and like Pern were talking, I guess.
That was. I feel like it was a little bit longer. It was like a month after the tournament, at least.
Oh no,
Yeah.
Neil went on like a
Yes.
month-long surf
So we
vacation.
we couldn't do anything because Neil was our jungler as
He
well.
went surfing for a month. Which,
Right,
of course he did.
As Neil does, of course.
And then, I don't even remember what we tried to do, but like we like tried like a different configuration of the team, and instantly we were just like, no.
Yeah. And then the COG thing happened. And funny story, I want to see what Kabam says, but Kabam was the one who got me back into SPL because I wasn't gonna be in SPL that
Like
season.
you didn't want to, or you just weren't going to?
No, I wanted to, but I just couldn't get on a team.
Yeah.
So I'll let Kabam tell the story from his perspective, but it's good.
So like DJ hits me up. He's like, "Yo, you want to play SPL?" And in my head, I'm like, "This is not really how I envisioned it happening. Like usually you relegate it in.
Yeah.
Cool." But I'm also like, this is maybe my once in a lifetime chance. I'll give it a go. And he's like, "All right, you're gonna be laning with Matty Pocket." And like at that point, Matty Pocket had been like kind of going in and out of the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't like super sold on it. And I was like, well, like, I think at this time, I'm trying to like appease the masses. I'm like, if it's comparable, I'd rather play with Aror because I'm more comfortable playing with him. And then it was me and Meerkat in Camp Aror versus DJ and Best in Camp Matty Pocket.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember just being like really insistent. I was like, listen, like I've never laned with that person. We're kind of be like raw dogging SPL. I think it's better like if I don't have like a uncomfortable period coming in.
Yeah.
And eventually, you know, like I just didn't budge because it didn't super matter to me at that point if I was SPL or not. They were just like, okay, we'll take you and Aror. That's how we did it.
Nice.
And yeah, Kabam got me back into SPL season 2, and I would have never been playing at least in season 2 again after that.
Cyclone kind of did that with me in a weird way. I mean, not to jump too far ahead, but like in season 3, we had Kabam was our coach, and we had absolutely stunk it up at a group play tournament before season 3 regionals. And I think it was like Weekend had hit up Spin and was like, hey, do you and Oceans want to join us? And they didn't want to play with Incon. And they were like, yeah, we'll join if we can, like, we'll join if we also, like, take Mike. And then it was like the 3 of us moved over. And I feel like that ended up being, like, a pretty important part of my career because we ended up, like, 5-0.
You guys owned really hard.
Yeah, we 5-0'd that gauntlet and made Worlds for, like, the first time in my career. And I feel like if that didn't happen, like, I might have been just, like, done on the spot, maybe.
Yeah. Stuff like that happens pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you never know what's going to happen like when you're playing. I feel like one thing can just completely change your entire trajectory of like how things are going to play out for you, for sure.
Yeah, I remember how the trajectory of that land changed really fast. I don't know if you recall that.
I do. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
What happened in that land?
You might remember, Chalk would use his ult and slam it down, and he would knock people out of their CC immunity.
Oh, yeah. It was so you could like chalk out like Raijin and stuff.
You could
back
even
then.
chalk ult people out of Kamazot's ult sometimes if you timed it really well. So we were like, dude, I don't know why we did this. We were like, we're riding that. Like, Cyclone was like, I am playing chalk. So we arrive, and we're sitting in the studio. You know how at that point they had like the bleachers, and it was like all kind of like compact. So we're at the bleachers, and they're like, yo, we need to do like a play test. Anyone want to come play? Mike goes up there.
I'd like to be on the record saying, while I don't know, we've talked about this many times. I'd like to be on the record saying I do not remember this. It's one of the very few things in my career I do not remember it, but I could believe it.
So Mike goes up there, and he's just like, he's slamming, right? He's playing chalk, and he's slamming, and he gets to a big team fight. I don't even remember what character he is, but he just ults them out of their ult. Everyone goes, what the fuck? What the fuck? And then our Bane pick for the entire tournament gets banned on the spot. And then we are in disaster mode for the rest of it. And mind you, there was no way we were ever going to get through it because later, like not even like a day later, I see Skilly getting TP'd on by Andenstern, dunked in his back camps, and mentally shattered.
Yeah,
So while it's easy to say it was the chalk, there was just no way. TP Thor was running amok.
Yeah.
What hope did we have?
I do really want to come back to season 3 and that team, but first, I had a question for both of you because, as Aror kind of said, when he had quit Eager, that's when I came into the SPL. And when I came into the SPL, I feel like there was kind of, it was pretty uncommon for teams to have a coach. Eager had Kret at the time as a coach. And I was kind of curious, like, moving on from season 2, how kind of both of you viewed coaching within Smite, because of course eventually in season 3 you would end up coaching at a time where it wasn't super common. It wasn't like every team did not have a coach the way they do now.
Yeah. Well, I remember in season 3 I made one more attempt at a team. I made it was me, Jaco Malfoy, Neil Ma, Vesalius, if you remember him.
I do.
I remember him,
And we played with Paradox. And we were pretty good. We just wouldn't like show up some weeks, like literally just would not appear because none of us read anything, so we didn't understand the point system.
I think I subbed in one of the it might have not been like a weekly, but I played with you guys because I remember Paradox played Neath solo and I laned with you and we had Neil jungle and I think Jaco was mid or something.
Yeah,
I think I played 1 week with you guys or something.
But so we ended up like losing. Like it was so stupid because we made like our last run, right? because we realized that we had to get enough points. We knocked Ven's team out when he was still Crazy Toaster, and he couldn't. He didn't.
What
he
a
didn't.
great name.
He didn't make it to the next step because we did that. Like we just spoiled, and we made it all the way until like we needed to win this last match. But of course, I had stayed up like 35 hours,
As one does.
and I had run out of steam because the tournament was going too long. And we ran like I remember we ran like Sol, Hunbats, and like Ymir. Like that was me, Neil, and Jake. And it didn't matter what the other two were playing. I was like, we're just gonna run this the whole way through the bracket and pray it works. And then we got to the people who watched our VOD because we took too long,
Right.
and they banned it.
That really sucks.
And then Paradox got super soloed by Cope Baby like 4 times in a minute.
That'll
That's
happen.
never good.
Yeah, he got super soloed. I had an Ama just slamming me down. I was like, I can't fix this. So I get out of that, and I'm like, I don't think I ever want to play competitive again. This makes me miserable. But I like being around.
What part of it made you miserable? Just like the stress of like the weekly schedule, or what?
I just didn't want it as bad as the people that were competing. And like I had kind of come to terms with that, but like it's messed up to keep trying to compete if like you don't want it as much as the people you're playing with. So I was like, I don't really like feeling like I'm being a detriment in that way. But maybe if I was like supplementing them in some way, like being like a coach or something, you know, I feel like I could, all this time I invest in at that point, you know, it's 3 years. Who cares now that we're at 10? But at that point, it felt like a lot.
Yeah.
I was like, so I'm just going to give it a shot because no one else had a coach anyway. I might as well try.
Yeah.
And then I did. And then we got 6th or 5th, whatever it was.
Yeah, I mean, I think we were 5th. And I feel like that team, this is talking about Envy, which was Kabam was the coach, and it was Oceans and me duo lane. It was Kiki mid, Skeleton jungle, and Cyclone solo.
So, yeah.
The team was essentially Cyclone with 4 role players, which to be fair, at the time, that's a pretty good team. Like, you know, I mean, even now it'd be a pretty good team.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Oceans was just an X factor. But like,
I feel like everybody was. Like, Kiki would have like pop-off games as well. Kiki had a very specific god pull, and when it hit, it really hit.
He could go hard for sure. He had some really good games.
Afro games for us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so funny. Like any annoying mage, that's what Kiki wants to do. Like if it's annoying, that's what he wants to play.
Well, you know what sucked? I think I remember this now. Is like we got the team with Kiki, and then I think in that same year they got rid of backdoor protections from like pets. I think I remember DJ being
That's
mad
right.
about that stat.
Yeah.
So like we lost Nuwa,
Yeah.
and that was like all season 2 Kiki.
Yeah.
So things got tougher. Yeah, the game changed a lot when you couldn't backdoor like that anymore, actually.
Yeah. I remember Scotty was out for a little bit, right, during that? And that's one of the main reasons why they did it as well.
Yeah.
Because Scotty could literally just walk up to a Phoenix with her dog, and her dog was unkillable when her ult was alive. So you just ult the Phoenix, and you'd get it every time, guaranteed as Scotty. It was the most broken thing in the game, probably. I remember I used to hate playing against Scotty in ranked. It was torture.
Yeah, Scotty was a menace for like another year after that too. That was a mess of a time. Season 3. Yeah, I remember it was tough too because on our team it was trying to get Cyclone and Skeely to agree on something, Mission Impossible, and then it was trying to listen to Ocean's talk, Mission Impossible. Because it was tough too because he would say like he would have like 1,000 ideas, and for every like 500 he'd have a good one, but because of the previous 500 we were not going to acknowledge it ever. So remember he was like insisting that we should be doing like the Bumba's Mask ADC.
Dude, I was gonna say that. Yeah, he was the first person to do Bumbas on Hunter, and it became like meta for like an entire year.
We wouldn't let him. He did it like one game and we lost. We were like, it's because of the Bumba's Mask ADC. Get out of here.
Because Bumbas was 500 gold back then.
Yeah.
So
you go Bumbas and starter, and then 2 each pot.
Yeah, but he started that, and I remember it stuck
was
like
all
that.
Of season 4.
Yeah, it
Literally
stuck like that
it, yeah.
until Bumbas was gone, or until it got changed at least to either a starter item or it was just completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yep.
What were kind of your first impressions? Because I you guys kind of had a lot of backstory, like playing together and stuff. I had known of you guys, but I didn't like that team. For me was somewhat unfamiliar. Like you and Oceans and Cyclone and Kiki, I didn't like. I think we were just like neutral. I didn't necessarily like. I wasn't super close with anyone at the time. I
Yeah.
don't think. So did you feel like from the outside now you're in a new role, right? You're trying to apply the years that you've put into Smite in a coaching role. Did you feel like that was difficult having a player like me that you maybe didn't know how they, like how to work with them, or just kind of the difference in playing with teammates versus coaching teammates? Did you feel like that made your job easier or harder, or how did you look at that?
It was like a lot of growing pains. I remember, I don't know how much you remember what I did back then, but I used to like watch each game like 5 times from like each person's perspective and like write notes and timestamps for every single one. And I did that for like months, but that meant like when I was going through our VODs, it would take like 6 hours.
Yeah.
Super inefficient. But when I was trying to review my stuff, like that's how I would try to self-coach myself. I would just go through and watch my perspective. I was like, oh, I'll just apply that to everyone.
Yeah.
And it'll be useful. And I think I ended up like, I remember one thing I was always telling Kiki, it was like the most obvious thing now, but people didn't do it back then. It was like, listen, like if you see the jungler go to the right side of the map, stand on the left side of the lane so that no matter what, if he's ganking you, he has to blink on you to kill you.
Right.
So that way you're not like getting killed for nothing.
Yeah.
If you're going to get killed. And it was stuff like that like people just didn't think about ever. It was like, if you're carrying a sentry with you, ward where you want to stand. So that way no one's going to like see you where you're standing and stuff like that. It was like very basic things, but people didn't do them. So it's like making notes of all these things. But it was like a huge waste of my time because 3 people on the team like super appreciated and used it and 2 people didn't look at it. So it was like I had to learn how to do something that was helpful for everyone.
Yeah.
Because how much time you invest does not equal how much you're going to get back ever.
Yeah, very true.
So you have to just apply your energy and your time the correct way to get the result that you want. And that whole year was a really big growing pain for me. As far as like I didn't know much about you or Oceans, but I trusted Kiki and Cyclone pretty implicitly. So if they wanted to team with you guys really bad, then I was just confident that was the right decision. So I wasn't at all worried about that. I think I've never been on a team where I didn't have like a really close person who I really valued their opinion making the roster. Like when I was on Splice with him, I might not have thought much of the players he had picked if it wasn't him picking them, but when he was the one presenting it to me, I was like, okay, well, if he has faith in it, he's been right most other times. So
yeah,
I'll trust that. But I always tried not to get involved in things that I didn't have someone on the team whose opinion I really trusted.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. For me, I feel like going into season 3, that was a really interesting period, and something that Aurora and I have touched on a bit in the past is that I don't know how well you remember it, but before that group stage tournament that we were talking about, that was kind of the first time that, like, my initial time on Envy and with you was a lot of like, how do we get better as a team together? Like, what's our play style? What role does everybody fit? Like, how do we play the game? Like, the way that, the top teams at the time, Eager and Soar and Luminosity, we had to kind of figure out, like, what do they do that works and how do we, like, apply some of that? How do we counter some of it? So it was just, like, how do we get better in general? And then I really remember leading up to that group stage, we had scrimmed Aurora's team on Eager because we were in different groups. Yeah. I remember we had basically scrim partnered, and that was the first time where I really remember having, like, a team feel like it was split in half, where like you're faced with this like problem, this like meta problem, because at the time they were starting to play like, Hog on solo laners, and they would invade you every single game, and they would just like have their solo laner was basically just a second support along with Aurora. Devios would play like a
Sobek.
Yeah, he'd play a Guardian like
Xingchen.
Sobek, Xingchen, and Terra. What was the starter item I'm looking for? That Mark of the Vanguard?
Mark of the Vanguard.
He would play Mark of the Vanguard Guardians with Hog, and he would literally just rotate to objectives and set up like burn beads and Hog objectives with Aurora. Yeah. That's like all the 2 of them did. And they just snowballed us every single game. And I remember having like a team clash where half of the people are like, this is garbage, it's cheese, it's not going to work. And the other half are like, we lose to this literally every single game, and it is not close. Like, it is not close. So I was kind of wondering, like, from your perspective, how was that more frustrating as a coach? Did you feel like you just had to let people figure it out? Like, did you feel powerless, or did you feel like you could help guide people?
It's hard because, like, a lot of times when I was coaching on a few of these teams, like, I'd be getting, like, also, like, private messages from these people trying to, like, discuss their point of view more.
Yeah.
But I do remember distinctly in those discussions, I was like, these guys are always looking for like the next thing
Yeah.
to like break the game. And if it's owning us, and I'd always get like, we just have to play better. I was like, but how?
Yeah.
What does play better look like? And no one would ever give me any like concrete evidence of that. But I remember for me, like before in coaching, I always like, I learned that asking leading questions, even if it didn't work there, was super, super important. Like giving the answer and giving your opinion on something can be valuable, but getting everyone to reach that conclusion the same way and see the line of thinking makes it a lot easier for people to just accept it. That one was just particularly hard because, yeah, that was like a big clash, but we were having lots of clashes leading up to that too.
Yeah.
Where like the roster almost imploded a couple of times and like stuff like that. So like we had like other turmoil to handle, and once we got to that, that was like the last thing that we could have handled at that time.
Yeah.
Because I think, you know, people were getting sick of like getting yelled at, getting blamed, not being heard, stuff like that. So it was
the basic season to season
Yeah.
grind
Yeah.
of Smite.
Yeah, it was
that's
like,
really what it is.
we had just
Yeah.
gotten really far, and like I remember before we started scrimming your team, it really felt like we started to figure it out,
Yeah.
and then you just blasted our ass.
Yeah.
And it
Because
was
we had a good finish to that split. I'm pretty sure we finished 5th. And there were a lot of teams, like, I'm pretty sure we took a game off them in the
Yeah.
SPL. I think we
beat
either...
the whatever team Andy was on. I remember we beat.
I think that was Soar at the time. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we beat Soar.
Yeah, it was
And nobody-
Sword.
yeah,
Yeah, because
no-
it was second. It was the last phase of season 3, right?
Yeah.
So it was like that was like the Andy Baskin Soar with
Yep,
Jigs and Snoopy, I think.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and everybody thought they would just be like the best roster. And we also beat we 2-0'd Enemy as well. And they were first in the
Yeah.
spring split. We 2-0'd them.
And I remember it was because it was the first time we had ever just decided like a very hard on a strategy. 'Cause I was always really big because I had played with Aror, and he like kind of taught me like, if you can just like disable a player, you can make the game super easy. And I was like, dude, Max is gonna pick Blink Artemis. Let's just kill him.
Yeah.
And then Skilly picked Rat and just dunked on his
Yeah,
head.
I remember
for
us playing
20
like
minutes
Rat
straight.
and like Alma support and literally just chain ganking him off cooldown. Just halting him off cooldown.
And we would have been in a different group if I remember it distinctly, because we were playing ALG, and it was, I think back then we played best of 2s, right?
Yeah.
And
Wasn't this like our last set?
we
if I
were,
remember
we were in the
correctly?
second game,
Yeah.
and Oceans was owning.
I
He
can't
was
remember this.
hard owning, carrying us. I have never heard our team in unison talk about how awesome Oceans was. And then for whatever reason, like Oceans had the same problem I did. Like past 30 minutes, anything goes. It didn't matter anymore. He was ready to get out of the game. And he just walks up to the Phoenix in front of my front line without beads, because he had just lost beads not 10 seconds before.
Yep.
And goldfishes it in front of the Phoenix and gets Ymir blink frozen, dies, and we instantly lose.
Yeah, that'll happen.
And we're just like, why'd you do that? He was like, I got bored. And I was,
What was the famous Oceans quote you always used to say? Like,
oh,
Is this from the scrim?
take it away, Mike.
Oh my god.
Oceans has a lot of really great moments. I need to make that clear.
Okay, so
this one's the best.
This was when we were scrimming you guys, and allow the record to show I was on the wrong side of history of not instantly realizing that Erlong support was broken, like turbo broken. I was definitely on the wrong side of history on that.
Not relevant to this though.
Yeah. So we're scrimming, and Oceans is dying in lane a bunch. And we talk about it as a problem. Like he and I, we work on our 2v2. We get a lot better at it. And like through that process, there is a time. Was it a Sobek pluck?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it was a Sobek pluck. And instead, like, we were at your guys' tower line, and he gets Sobek plucked, and I'm like, were your beads down? And he was like, no. I was like, oh, did you just, like, you couldn't do it in time? He's like, no, I just felt like I deserved to die. He said he deserved to die.
Yeah, I deserved to die there because they should have killed me on the wave, but they didn't.
Yeah, I mentally
So
imploded.
I gave them the kill.
Yeah, that scrim I did mentally implode.
Kabam would always tell me about how the deserve to die story would always make me laugh every time.
It's an all-time Oceans moment for me. Absolutely.
It literally is Hall of Fame status.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's crazy because every year I've always had someone like try to step up to the plate and do something pretty similar, but just not quite measure up.
Sam was pretty. We'll get to it, but Sam, he really was knocking on Ocean's door.
Sam was knocking on Ocean's door for sure, and I love that guy.
I love Sam.
But he owned me.
Yeah.
Okay, so my question for season 3 when you were coaching was like, what did you expect like when you started doing it? Did you expect people to like treat it differently since they had a coach, or like what'd you think going into it like when you first started?
I don't usually think about stuff in that way. I don't think. I kind of just wanted to do it because I felt like even though I had lost the drive to compete myself, I still I liked it and I liked being involved in it. And I thought I could I remember at the end of that, I was like, if I super tried and I could find the passion for it, I probably could have been one of the better players.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't think it was fair to other people to go through my rough patch to get there. But if I feel that way, then I could probably help people that I like, my friends, get to that spot. And that's what I wanted to do instead.
Did you expect anything from the players that you were coaching? Did you think that they were going to act a different way because you were coaching them, or do you think were you surprised about how things went as a coach? Because you have a different perspective, I feel like, as a coach compared to playing. Going into it, first week of scrims, we're like, what the heck is going on? It's what was your thought process when you started?
I don't think I realized the ways in which it would be hard, and I think it'd be really funny if you ever talked to Neil about this, because it was the funniest thing to see him go through everything I had gone through up until this point, because he's just sitting there watching the game. He's like, I'm so stressed because I cannot actually influence anything.
This
right
is
now.
recently.
Yes.
Yeah,
when
that makes sense.
At playing
tournament, yeah.
He's like, I can't do anything after I leave the room. I was like, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And you
That
better hope you see the one thing they need. So, and I think that was the one thing, because for me, I was like, coaching will at least it'll be less stressful. It was not.
I feel like it's the opposite.
It is significantly more stressful.
Yeah, I never really thought about that because I've had coaches in the past as well talk about like when I'm playing, I don't feel stressed
Same.
at all. I feel just locked in the moment. I don't feel nervous or anxious or stressed anything. I feel like I'm just playing. But my girlfriend, my parents, other coaches are all like, oh my God, I was so scared in this moment or whatever.
Or they're like, how do you do this every week? Is what my
Yeah.
mom says. If the games are close or whatever.
Because you can see everything. Smite for the spectator is very different for Smite when you're playing.
Yeah.
So I can see everything before it happens. And also, I'm watching your scrims all the time. I'm familiar with the mistakes and what leads to them. Yeah. And I'm seeing, I'm seeing the pattern start at 3 minutes, and I know it's going to culminate at 19. And we get to 19 minutes, and I'm just hard gripping my chair, waiting for the moment where I go, I'm dead. And then I hear it, and I just throw, my headset off. I'm like, fuck. How do I reach them? But it's stuff like that where, I was I think the other thing, too, that I found really confusing is I thought if I just spent more time on it, it would equal, better understanding.
Yeah, it's a trap a lot of the time.
But a lot of the time, that just made me miserable.
Yeah.
Both as a player and as a coach.
Gets you super overwhelmed, burnt out, that type of thing.
Yeah, because you're putting in the time and you're still losing.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh no.
And you can't get a zoom when you do that. You can't get a zoomed out. I feel so many problems within a team atmosphere, especially, is very simple things. People have conflict with one another, but they don't just communicate with one another. They don't say just directly hey, I don't like the way we play this pick or something. I want to do this or that, or I don't enjoy drafting that. It could be literally anything, but people just don't communicate. And I feel that's something that I'm kind of curious when you kind of realize that, because I feel from both of our perspectives, one of, if not your best feature as a coach, was always your ability to help the people on the team communicate with one another.
Yeah.
And what do you think kind of led to that?
I think I started realizing when the players would argue with each other. I remember I most noticed it on Splice, and that's where I started to really change. It was that people would be saying the same thing with just like different words, but they'd be like yelling at each other, like really getting into it. And that's when I was like, I've just got to be like a filter, because at the end of the day, I had been kind of stuck, but I was still, the oldest person on the team. I was like 25, 26. And these guys are like 17, 18, 19, weren't like super engaged in like competitive things outside of Smite. So like they didn't have like sports to like learn how to like operate as a team, or some people did and some people didn't. That actually made it worse sometimes.
Yeah, because then there's a
huge disconnect.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like some people are like, oh, this is just like how you do this, and the other people, yeah.
And then when you start to like super listen, you hear what people are getting mad at, and realizing that like that's people aren't recognizing what they're doing is making the other person mad, or how it's making and influencing them, or how it's changing how they're approaching the game. There'll be stuff where like, like they want to try something like a strategy, and someone's like, okay, and then like they super don't try. Like they just do the thing as it was told to them, but they don't think about it, engage with the idea, or try to execute on it. They just like...
That's such a common thing.
And then it goes to shit, and they're like, see?
It's like, yeah, they don't put in any effort, and they're like, yeah, that idea was awful.
Yeah. And like that's like where like filtering comes in. It's like, no, you have to like really engage with the idea. Like you can't just say you're gonna do it and then like super half-ass it and be like, haha. Like it's not supposed to be a gotcha moment. Like we're supposed to win.
Right.
So you gotta like genuinely engage with
and
the
things
ideas.
like this happen still today, like
absolutely.
all the time. I'm sure on every team, but my team as well. Like even like same problems with just like the game has changed so much in so many different aspects, but like trying to get everybody to work on something like that and at least like entertain each other's ideas is always the hardest thing to do within a team. And that's what makes the great team so good, I feel like, is being able to get on that page with each other. And the thing is, like, I remember, so I'm going to jump a little ahead. We'll come back. But like after you weren't coaching me anymore, I realized how hard it was to get everybody to get to that point. Like I've never been a good person with my words when it comes to getting everybody on the same page, but that's what I want. But it's so hard for me to do it. I feel like out of all the coaches that I've been with, like you've done it the best, like just getting everybody on the same page. And I remember I was talking to someone about your coaching, and like, it was season 7, and this person really irritated me when they said this. They said like, yeah, you don't have your yes man anymore, Kabam, on your team. And I was like, Kabam is anything but a yes man. He was the one who he like, you never took a side, and you really like listened to everybody's like take on the situation, and you really put in a lot of thought on how it could all come together as like a team thing. And like, that's what I want. Like, that's what I think of when I think of you, is like just getting everybody to come together and compete for the same goal, like in like the best way possible. It was, so I really appreciated like working with you with that.
Yeah, I think I know where that came from. It's just that like different teams need different things, and I think I learned that most with Dragons. It's that sometimes like it's not about getting people on the same page, like through like that kind of conversation. That's how I like to do it, and that's how I think is most productive for all people to be happy on a team. But there are a lot of other teams that benefit from someone like a coach just being like in charge and like taking charge of things. But that's not my personality, and I wouldn't do that well either. Like, I wouldn't be able to just come in and be like, this is what we're drafting, and if somebody contests me, I'd just be like, fuck you. Like,
I could never imagine you being like that either.
Like that's not like something that would fit me, that I would do well, or I think the teams that I was on would benefit from. But that was like when you and I would do drafts, it was usually you, me, and then like +1 with like people checking in every like couple of hours. Like we genuinely, like, I know when I was with him, we would start doing picks and bans, and for the beginning of the year, we did it like extensively. And then as the year went on, it was like, this takes too long. This is like, like it's a drain, and like it is like really frustrating.
Honestly, it wasn't even that. I mean, we'll get to it later, but it wasn't the time that was draining.
Yeah. Time compounded it, I think.
Yeah.
But like when me and Aror do it, because Aror, like, he kind of explained, like, he's not always the best with his words, but the best thing about Aror when he's in a team environment is that no matter how long it takes, he's going to get his point across. And like it might be a bit of ad-libbing, it might be a bit of figuring out what words are supposed to be where and what they're supposed to mean. But he'll guide you there. You just have to participate and engage. And I remember Ven was really good with us because we'd be able to, basically we would do like a little like survey, be like, what do you guys not want to play against this week? And we get it from Scream, we get it from Cyclone. And Cyclone would like listen and engage, but would otherwise just kind of be like doing his own thing.
Yeah.
And Sot would like be like, I don't want to deal with this week. We'd like, okay. And we'd take that and we'd come up with like 20 drafts and we'd figure it out. And then we would just like present to the class and get feedback, reiterate on the feedback, and keep going and going until we got like what we liked. We were like, we tried to have as many situations covered as possible. And, you know, that would take us like 3-4 hours. We'd go out to dinner. We'd still be talking about it, but it was just like a really good feedback loop that took a lot of time, but it made me feel like I had an answer whenever something happened that we didn't expect. And being able to do that, I think, was a product of having good conversation. But a lot of teams, like, they don't want, it's not even a lack of commitment, but like staying focused on a topic like that for extended periods of time, because we really didn't take a break either. We just kept going.
Yeah.
That's not like normal. But for me, it was up until that point. So like that was like a point where I had to adjust to, because we wouldn't stop until everyone was like, that's good.
Yeah. But yeah, it was so hard for me that first year because I just had no one to talk to. It felt like, because like I could always just go to you and talk to you about like issues, but like, because there's so many issues with that team I played with in season 7, and I feel like we never got them fully resolved. And like it hurt us so much, and it just felt so bad. Like I don't know, that's like the best way to put it.
Well, it's so hard too because like no matter what the team is or the group of people, and I'm experiencing it now as well, just playing with different people. Like the one thing in common with every team that I've done well with, won a tournament with, like whatever the case may be, you get to a point where at the very least everybody understands what you're trying to do and you're like on the same page and you have like a style or an idea that you're executing.
Yeah.
And the other certainty in that is that there will be a period throughout the year where you're not on that page and you're presented with different patches, different metas, different teams that are doing something that's throwing you off. And I feel like it's really hard. Like not every single player is the same way, right? Like I'm somebody who I feel like I'm pretty good at just like I could talk through a problem and like argue through it forever. There's some people that are like, I would say like Scream, for example, is probably a more like, like I don't know whether to call it like an abstract thinker. Like he's somebody like you just need to leave him alone for a little bit. And if he sleeps on it, if he gets some like a couple hours where he's doing nothing, like he'll get really good ideas and he'll be able to present them to you. And I just think like, I think a lot of people don't think enough about how different people handle communication and how to get people on the same page.
Yeah. And like, that's the most important thing is regardless of how you get there through conversation, just through playing or whatever, like if your team's on the same page, you're going to be a dangerous team no matter what.
For sure.
So
yeah, people always spend so much time focusing on like whether like something is like the meta or whatever, like this team, what they're doing is the best. And like, I've always said like, if you went back to any of the worlds that we've played and the team that won worlds, if we played on that patch for a year straight, it would look unrecognizable compared to like the worlds that we saw, right? Like things constantly develop. There's always different counters. And there's also things you just forget. Like people get so tunnel visioned into like, oh, I gotta play this character because it's OP and like that's the end of it. And you don't think about like, well, what if it wasn't that OP? Like people don't ask that question that often.
No, definitely.
Okay, so I want to bring us back to end of season 4, you were coaching ALG, right?
Yeah.
And then my team and then ALG didn't qualify for Worlds, right? Because I was on Trifecta. What happened? What happened at the end of season 4 for you? Because this is like right around where Splice was getting made. Was that season 4? That's what I want to talk about.
End of season 4. Oh, dude, we lost to like Sheikah in the. I think there was. wasn't there was like.
Were you in the Challenger Cup or what?
No, dude. Did we still do that tournament back then where you're like qualifying for the qualifiers? Where like it was like the 8th place. It was like a gauntlet.
I think
and whoever won kept going.
Oh yes, yeah.
So we were like, we just,
who was on your team then? Do you even remember? It was Cyclone.
It was Cyclone.
Was it Mike?
Oceans.
Still? Yeah.
Weekend.
Neil, right?
Neil.
Oh no, Mike was
Met
on
Yankee?
United. What am I saying?
Yeah, Matt.
Yeah.
Yankee.
Yeah, Matt.
Yeah, I mean that year was potentially the most angry I had ever gotten because like I couldn't get Oceans and Met to stop hitting thorns. And that was we would be owning so hard. And then the enemy would glow purple and both my carries would die. I was like, you just have to stop hitting them. And they were like, no. I was like, why? And they were like, they're in front of me. I was like, right. And they would die.
My first Kuzenbo game in the SPL went like 56, 57. It went late. I don't know how. It might have been in the 40s, but the entire game, it was against ALG. It was when I was on Trifecta. And the entire game, Met and Oceans were not hitting me when I popped Thorns or Kuzenbo 2. And then I think Oceans was playing mid or whoever was playing mid.
Oceans was playing mid and he Agni bombed himself to death.
No, it was Raijin.
Raijin.
It was
I remember
Raijin.
watching
That's
that.
even worse, actually.
Yeah, so the entire game, I would pop my 2 and Thorns and he wouldn't ult me. And then like 46 minutes into the game, I forget where it was at on the map, but I just remember
Fire
him
Giant.
going
It
into
was by
Raijin
Portal or
ult,
whatever, yeah.
and he just starts slamming me and he one-shots himself. And I'm like, nice.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
then we won the game off it.
Yeah, that was tough. That was a tough time.
I actually forgot in season 4, like, everything we just talked about with communication as well. I feel like that was probably the point where I was like, when I had like quit that ALG team, we were not doing so hot. And I remember I remember just thinking like, I felt like I couldn't communicate with anyone on that team. Like, I just didn't know how, like, Oceans and I just do not think alike.
No.
Same thing with, like, Met and I were friends, but we definitely, like, Met and I don't think similarly at all. And then it was like, Kurt would literally, like, Kurt was just Curtin, you know? And I think Spin and I are both, like, bad losers. Me at the time, especially, like, I was bad at losing. Like, I
used to get essays from, we would lose or just.
Yeah, no, I was really bad at just losing and taking a step back and thinking about, like, I would just word vomit and just like all these thoughts would hit my head. It was really bad.
Well, it was just, I remember it was so impossible because we would find the problem. Like, okay,
Right.
we're going to solve it. And I remember there was one pivotal moment in my mind where I was like, it cannot be fixed. And it was when Jungle and Solo were a duo lane, right? And we were like, we simply lose every time. And I was like, let's play Bologna Osiris. We can't lose then. And we got double killed. And I was like,
Unlucky.
It simply cannot happen.
Yeah.
We cannot have Bologna Osiris laning together and losing.
Yeah. I remember, like, going into, I don't know, going from that team to E United. It was so funny because my sole focus was like, I might not be the best player, but that team had so many, like, environmental problems with, like, how they communicated with Scream and Benji and Pandacat and Chaos. And I'm like, my one goal is I'm just going to try to become, like, the best teammate ever. Like, I'm just going to try to, like, I'm just going to make everybody have fun. I'm going to try to get everybody on the same page. I'm going to make sure people, like, communicate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of eye-opening when that, like, actually clicked.
I remember because after spring, we had, like, a really long conversation. And we talked about, like, because you were like, I don't even know if I still want to play or what I'm going to do.
Did I quit, like, after the split, right? Before the tournament.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, before the spring tournament.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in your bed, yeah.
Uh-huh.
I remember we talked about it. I was like, I don't think you have to quit unless that's, like, what you want to do. Like, we talked a lot about, I was like, listen, like, the environment is just not good on this team. I think you give it another shot if you feel like you want to. I think it'll be worth your time. That year was probably pretty worth your time, I'd say.
Yeah, it was worth my time for sure. Yeah. Wait, so going into season 5,
Yeah.
so for you guys, I think we had beat you guys on Trifecta.
Yep.
And then you ended up not qualifying through the gauntlet or whatever at regionals. And then you're saying, so that ALG team, who did you guys lose to in the gauntlet?
It was like the Salsa Squadron or whatever.
Oh, you lost, like, early on.
Yeah, we were like the 8th seed and we were prepping, and I had like all the screenshots of the picks and bans, the detailed plan and all this stuff.
You guys just lost.
We eject the plan on the first pick, lose instantly. We all just left this. It was like, all right.
So from my perspective, something I'm really curious about, I think you've talked about it before, is that going into that Worlds in Season 4, there were only 2 North American teams that qualified, which was us on the United and Luminosity at the time, which was like Barra, Jeff, Baskin, Mask, and Aqua. We were the only 2 NA teams, and so we were just scrimming each other all the time, and I remember we really wanted a different perspective. Like, whenever they couldn't scrim, or if we just wanted a break from scrimming them, we were looking for a different team, and I remember Aror, or I think it was you, maybe, and someone else that actually hit me up, and you guys were already working on Season 5, which at the time, normally a lot of people, they're just like, they're checked out, they miss Worlds, they're done, they don't want to start playing until the new season comes out. And we had actually scrimmed against you guys a few times, I remember. How did that kind of form?
Yes, so after my team got eliminated, I knew I wanted to play again really bad that year. So I was scrimming with a bunch of different teams. I think I scrimmed at EU Ping. I remember I scrimmed on an account called Kronos, and I played against Cherry's team. And I played there. That's when they were playing the Triple Guardian, and I played Guan Yu. And I remember I was just horsing all 3 of the Guardians in one of the fights at the same time, like full duration Guan Yu horse. But anyways, I was scrimming a lot, and then I was like, I don't know, because I was thinking about maybe playing on an EU team, and I'm like, I knew that I liked playing with Divios and Best a lot because I was really good friends with them. And they both just took a break after the
Eager kind of fell apart.
Yeah,
or whatever.
We played under AI, and that didn't really work out. And then I ended up just joining Trifecta on the 3rd split. So I knew I would want to play with them again. So I asked them if they'd be down, and then it really came to I didn't know who I was gonna lane with, number one, because I remember I really liked laning with Zap. He's probably one of my favorite teammates I played with for sure, and I knew that he already probably had something. And I remember back in Season 1, I really liked playing with Cyclone, so I hit him up, and then Cyclone's like, "Yeah, I'm down to join, but Kabam's got to be our coach." And I'm like, "I'm down. I love Kabam." So that's kind of how that happened. And then we didn't really we couldn't really find a jungler, so we went with Yuji. I remember because he was just tearing up the rank scene, and it didn't work out. But we ended up scrimming you guys, I think, a couple times prior to that Worlds. With that roster, and it was good. It was really good practice, I feel like, for us.
Yeah, I think it was you guys, and there was another roster that I want to say that Alec was with. It was I think it was that cryptic team that didn't make it. It was Alec and Sam and maybe it was Vedium and Gino and stuff. But we had scrimmed against a couple teams, and it was honestly some of the most important days of practice for us, because that's when we kind of we got to test okay, if we're not just in our little scrim bubble, does this translate, or is this just a scrim meta that we're doing?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was really, I think it was really important to us, and I also think, kind of from my perspective, I had experience with both Kabam and Cyclone as teammates at that point. I felt I didn't even know the kind of the stuff that you're talking about, where, you feel you struggle to get people on the same page. From my perspective, that mix of the 3 of you guys, I felt that just kind of, from the outside, even when you guys were struggling, I felt you guys always had a style on that team. It might not have worked, but I remember even the split, I think you guys, were you 5th or 6th? There was only 6 teams in the SPL.
Oh, we were last.
Yeah,
but
last. In the first phase,
Yeah, the first phase, you guys were last, but I remember you guys went to a lot of game 3s, and you were
all of them.
the jank team, whatever. You guys always had a style, so I'm kind of curious, the transformation process from early Season 5 to when things started to, kind of fit together.
Yeah, so I feel the biggest thing, I put it in our notes, the Beach House Carry project of 2018. I feel that's what really got us all on the same page, because I think everybody had a lot of fun. I had a lot. That was
I hope so.
That was one of my. That is honestly, it is my favorite trip of all time that I've ever done. I had so much fun just because we went to Rochester, right, for a week or something, or 2 weeks for Splice, and just everything about that trip, nothing seemed like it went right at the start, but it turned out to be like the best trip ever. It was great. Like they said that they were gonna like drive us down like on like a huge like bus, and then it turned into like a SUV, and then it turned into like a minivan that barely fit all our computers. I remember Cyclone was in the back, and he just
They were all crushed.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Sino was sitting on my lap, and Best and Sino were like this in the back seat of a car, and then Cyclone was like in the way back, and the computer boxes are sliding around, and he's just sleeping in the back of the car, and we're like on like an 8-hour road trip. Fun fact, that was the last time I had McDonald's as well. Like, because we had to stop and get food, and we had McDonald's, and I got chicken selects, I remember, and that was like the last time I had that. But that whole trip was so much, and then when we got there, it was great. I mean, me and Kabam walked probably. How many miles do you think we walked on that trip? Like over 100.
Yeah,
at
I mean, we
least.
did 5 or 6 a day because we were like, we had like a seafood place, and it was like all the way at the opposite end. Like you went past the boardwalk, and it was called the Red Lobster Pot. And we'd go there, and there was like a whole strip of like seafood places. So we would just like go to like different ones each day.
Yeah.
We'd walk the opposite direction on the. We were just always on the beach.
That's
doing
awesome.
Stuff.
It was so much fun. And then we went to that lighthouse place, the ice cream.
Soft serve.
Was it soft serve or was it
It was
Italian
soft serve and
ice?
Italian ice.
Yeah. That place was great. But yeah, no, that was so much fun. I had so much fun that trip. That was the first time I think that like I was in an environment where we were all together like scrimming in person.
Yeah.
Like consistently for like over a month.
I actually want to, for those who don't know, like how kind of season 5 went, to add a little bit of context at that time. I think NA had been somewhat stagnant for a little bit. It was mostly like us and Luminosity who were kind of like first, second, back and forth in these splits. And Splice at the time, they were the last place team, but they were all, most of you guys were on, West Coast ping or whatever, right? Like Cyclone was on West Coast ping.
Yeah,
you were on like what, 90 or something?
No, I was on good ping. I was like
were
on
you?
like 50 ping. It wasn't bad, or 60
okay.
ping. Yeah, it was like
So it was Sino, right?
So
Sino.
it was Sino, Cyclone, and Divios. Sino had 100 to 110 ping. Cyclone had like 110 to 130, and then Divios had 140. And people always say like, because 140 is a lot. Because I feel like
is.
some of like these players that are playing over like in the UK, like I've watched their streams when they've played on NA ping, like they get better ping than Divios
100%,
got.
yeah.
Like he literally played on 140 ping. That like I feel like Divios doesn't get enough respect for the amount of ping that he played on for as well as he played for as many years as he did. Like,
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point. I'm scrimming with Dardas even now, and we call it like fake ping. Like some games he's on like 105 or something. Like it's really not that bad. But
Yeah.
I remember like, and back then as well, when we were playing our games, we used to have mornings where we started at like 10 a.m. Eastern. So it wasn't even just like the ping. It was also the
7
SPL
a.m.,
games.
yeah.
They were waking up at 7 a.m. And at that time, it was so different because, I've mentioned in the past, like my teammates were literally in high school. So we couldn't scrim until like 7 p.m. Eastern.
Yep.
And there would be Fridays where you scrim at 7 p.m. before an SPL game, and you're waking up at 7, like you're waking up at 10 a.m. the next day. And like, there's a lot of prep you have to cram into that time. And
yep.
I remember from the outside, you guys were always a team that I felt like you were just different than every other team, the way you would approach the game or the way you would draft. And you'd always get to a game 3. And I know from my perspective, we definitely had, I think the top NA teams at the time had a lot of like very stubborn ego of like, oh, like we're just better, it won't work, that type of thing,
Yeah.
And when you guys had gotten to that summer house and you started you basically were beating everybody other than maybe us at the time. I think you guys finished 3rd.
We lost to LG, which was like we lost the last
LG
place
was
team.
Our kryptonite.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
could not beat them ever.
Yeah.
Weak Nation took us down.
Always.
Unlucky. Yeah, I remember you guys finishing 3rd and like nearly making the tournament, the summer tournament. And I remember thinking like, I started to feel like you guys really had started to piece it together. And when you guys weren't on ping, you could really see like you guys had a style that was being formed. I think that was also around the time that you guys still had best in the summer, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I feel like it's crazy to say this and like it's like an obvious thing, and I feel like everybody kind of knows this, but like a lot of Smite, a lot of like any like professional competition, like anywhere, I feel like you can apply this to anything, is like a lot of it's just mental. Like
For sure.
and, like if you're like everybody's good enough. Like if you make it to SPL, like you're good enough. Like it's just like if you're mentally strong enough to like just showcase that basically.
Yeah.
And it's like it's really hard to do, but it's like really easy to say, I feel like.
Yeah. I mean, it's like the idea sounds so simple, but when you get into what that actually means, like there's a lot of layers to it. It's not even just like,
Yeah.
there's the stress of maybe like pressure, or maybe, you know, if you feel like morale is down, if, you know, you're losing a lot of scrims or something like that. But then there's also just like somebody calls you dog shit every single time you play or something, or someone tweets at you. It's like, you know, there's a bunch of stuff that really adds up. And I feel like at that time, you know, we were all still online, right? The league was online until you qualified for tournaments. And
Yeah.
it'd be maybe somewhat common, like a few teams maybe would like, I think a couple of the European teams
Yeah.
before Worlds, they might like boot camp with each other or something like that. But on the NA side of things, that was pretty much unheard of. Like no one really did that until you guys had done that with the beach house.
Yeah, so what I want to ask you is like thinking about that is crazy. Like letting 4 complete strangers just come over to like a really nice place that like 5 strangers. Yeah, like it was crazy. Like how did you orchestrate that? Like I would love to hear the story.
Yeah, I mean that was tough. Because I had to like before I got to asking you guys, I had to go figure it out with like my family. Because it's obviously like a family thing. I don't own it myself, so I had to like clear it with everyone. Obviously, my parents were not particularly ecstatic about it because they like to go in the summer, and it would be very hard to do with the number of people we had there. But you know, I remember being like a little bit like overly passionate about it, and basically being like exaggerating a bit, but being like, I'll regret it, you know, for the rest of my life if I don't do this. Trying to like really pull at the heartstrings. And my dad was like, you know, he went silent. He didn't really say anything. I was like, okay. And then the next day he was like, so what internet do you need? And I was like, okay. So that was first step. And then the next one was convincing Splice it was worth doing.
Or did Splice pay it, like to get you guys there?
No.
I was gonna say like, what?
No,
I can't believe that.
Breaks on that.
No.
But it was basically
They supplied the computers though, which was really
that's
nice.
huge,
Yeah.
because basically it came down to like, listen, I haven't talked to the team about it yet, but if we do this, you know, like what would you be able to provide me? At the very least, you know, would you be able to provide us with hardware? And they were like, we could definitely give you guys like computers, but like we're not going to do like food and stuff like that. And I was like, that's totally fine. And they're like, and you guys are just going to like pay the bills on it and stuff, like for like electric, internet, all that stuff. And we're like, yeah, I just need computers because they cost like thousands of dollars to ship them from like Canada and stuff. Like I can't do that. And they were like, okay. So, and they're like, since you're going to do this, we should have you guys like fly out and do content. This was like the whole bus thing. We're like, okay, yeah, that sounds so cool. And then after I finally got everyone that like, if they said no, it stopped dead. I was like, okay, now I should go ask them. And I half expected, because we didn't have like between Divios, Best, Cyclone, like they aren't like super social people. So I was like, I don't know how much they're going to dig this, but I think it's worth exploring. So I write my typical Kabam, like 3-paragraph, you know, fully cited.
Step banger every time, yeah.
Fully cited thing. and you know, I'm like, listen, like we are much better than 6. We took every team to another, like a third game.
Yeah.
3 of you play on unplayable ping. If you move here, and this, oh, by the way, I didn't know this. I just made it up. I was like, it'll be better. I was like, I hope so. And we get there, it's like 12 ping.
That's
it was the best ping I think I've ever played on. Still, it was like New Jersey, I guess, just has at
We're
least
literally on
at
the
the
coast.
time.
I had no reason.
Yeah,
to believe
I got
this
really
was
good ping in New Jersey too, better than Maryland.
Yeah,
as
like
well,
when we were in New Jersey, it was like the best ping I ever played on. It was so random, but it was great.
And they all were just like, yeah, we'll do that. I was like, oh, okay. But then when they said that, it now meant I had to execute on it.
Right.
So that I'm driving down to the beach house like every weekend to like get things sorted up. I remember they were like pulling in and I had just gotten the water on. Like
nice.
It was just like a bunch of like crazy stuff. And we're trying to set up. I'll never forget, man. This was like the dumbest chain of events. We unload everything. And the guy who helped us move down, he was like the coolest splice guy ever.
He was amazing. Yeah.
I loved that guy.
Me too.
And I was like, yo, you want to stay tonight? He was like, I'm going to go crash with someone. And he left. And we start opening up the PCs, and we have like foot-long cables for everything.
Nice.
And I was like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with the... Like, we couldn't even get them into the monitor. So me and Aror did like 4 trips to Walmart because every time we'd leave and come back, they'd be like, by the way, apparently we didn't have a plunger.
Yeah, we didn't have a plunger. Yeah.
Oh
yeah,
my god, dude, that's how we set up our team house and rival. Was the same thing. I had to keep going errands back and forth to get it was awful.
Like I'd get back, and like for some reason they would not call me. We'd get back, and they're like, by the way, we don't have this. I was like, call me, tell me.
We had to set up so it was like a table kind of like this.
Yeah, imagine this plus like 10 inches.
Yeah,
like got our setup.
And we bought what are they called? Power strips. We had them in the middle of the table.
I still have those.
Yeah, we had them in the middle of the table, and then we connected all the computers. So all the computers were on the table, like a table like this with all our monitors. And we had.
How did you guys fit?
It was a big table.
It was a big table. Yeah, it was big.
That's crazy.
And they had one monitor.
Yeah, I still play with one monitor though. I'm a one monitor gang. I don't know why.
Yeah.
People always are like, "How do you do that?" I don't know. I just like it, but yeah, it was just funny because all the computers were just on the table, and then we had the power strips just like across, and it worked out. I mean, everything worked. The internet was really good. The ping was really good.
Probably the biggest fire hazard ever, but it did work.
Did you guys feel like in that process, did you feel like what mattered more between the ping and just physically having everybody there?
Oh, I mean, my master, like the ping was like, they really weren't playing particularly bad. I thought the ping would be like a confidence boost. I remember Divios got on, he was like, dude, autos are just like, they hit automatically. Like I don't even have to aim. I was like, that's cool. But I was so confident that those guys would not fight in person the way they fought online, and it would mitigate like all of our issues.
Yeah.
And I was so right. There was one single fight, and it never happened again because it escalated pretty fast. And then it was fine. But compared to like, they would just be like in screen, and you can't mute in person. That was the other big lesson. I was like, you can't leave. Yeah. You're going to have to figure this out.
Yep.
That was people would just mute or like tab into another game or just leave.
Yep.
I was like, we simply are not going to deal with that.
Yeah.
That is not how it's going to be.
Just because I want to make sure we get through all the stuff. So you guys go to the beach house, you end up finishing 3rd that split.
Yeah.
And then you guys then have to go back to your previous setup, right? We're still not in-person SPL.
Mm-hmm.
And we go into that fall split. And I just want to give, like, from my perspective, we had made a roster change. We were first in the summer, and we had picked up Baskin, who I think at the time was just considered one of the best players in NA for sure, or certainly one of the best mid laners. And I remember a lot of like the outside, or honestly, I'm not going to lie, it felt like some of the other teams, I wouldn't put you guys in this group, but like, I feel like some of the other teams even just like accepted like, oh yeah, they'll be first, kind of. And like, it was like a really weird thing where...
Yeah, I didn't accept that.
No, of course not. Why? No, I never should. And it felt like this weird thing of everybody was like, oh, okay, they'll be first, but who's going to be the second team in NA? And I remember thinking, like, we were so stupid and arrogant back then. I remember you guys played a set. You played, like, Chernobog Jungle on Sino and, like, Opwash mid and stuff. And you guys...
X-Ball Chernobog comp. Shoutouts to Quig. That was the Quig comp right there. I think we ran, like... I was talking about this with Sino the other day, because Sino used to talk to Quig all the time back then. I think we ran, like, 3 of Quig's comps, and we won every SPL game that we ran of his comps.
That's OP.
Yeah.
Like Quig was the one who did the rat. He was the one who got Sino to buy rat acorn and like
do red speed. Level 1 and then gang.
Yeah, he used that. There was like one other one too, and we did all 3 of them, and they all worked.
Dude, I remembered we were playing double round robin splits back then, and I remember you guys had owned CLG. I think it was like Hurry, Snoopy, Fine Okay. You owned them with that comp. And we played you guys. We both had like a doubleheader week. We played you guys literally the next day, and we were so dumb and arrogant. We were literally like, we're gonna give them that exact. We were so egotistical. We were like, we're gonna give them that same draft, and we 2-0'd you guys, and then we played you again a couple weeks later, and we did the same dumb shit. We're like, we're just going to give them that draft. That was the only set we lost. You guys owned us. We went to like 3 games. You guys farmed us game 3. It wasn't even close. And that was the only set we lost that whole split. And I remember you guys had finished second. I remembered thinking like, I kind of feel like we're in trouble a little bit. And the reason I felt like that was because we had spent so much time just like being better players than people, just outscaling people mechanically. I remember Scream and I had a lot of really long conversations where we really tried to get Baskin to play Opwash and Zeus on our team because you guys would just farm us. And then same thing, like we had similar discussions with like the Guardian solos and with like Spin would play. You guys would play a lot of random ADCs. Like there were even some games you played like Loki against us before Worlds or
Loki Cabrakan.
Loki
the
Cabrakan.
Loki Cabrakan. Yeah, there were so many random things, and I was like, we just aren't that team, you know. Like we're not the team to be super adaptable in that way. We were just a team that like if we got the stuff we liked, and you know Benji is gonna like win his lane, Baskin will win his lane, Panda Cat will win his lane, and Scream and I will run it down and try to fit it together. And I remember playing against you guys, and it was like, you really had to address what you guys were trying to do in the game. Like we knew what you were going to do, and it just got to the point where we couldn't stop it. And then I remember going into that Worlds, I was super confident that I never felt so confident in just like an idea of like how to play the game, if that makes sense. Like the strategy that you guys had with starting 3 people in duo, you guys honestly like inted it the first time, right? Raffer like 2v3 killed you guys.
Yeah.
And
that's like the best case scenario though, if you int it and then you win the game off it. Because then the other teams think it's bad.
That's why I want to say
we
actually set you guys up so hard because that happened and we got owned our set. We lost to was it Trifecta at the time they were so called? Yeah, we lost to Trifecta in quarters.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody's like, there's all this noise about like, oh, we're the 2 best teams in NA and the defending champions who are like first the whole year in NA. We get owned right off the bat. You guys are trying the strat and everybody still thinks it's like a jank strat or whatever. And you guys win the game anyways, but everyone's like, oh yeah, they're not actually good. Like that, they literally got killed in a 2v3.
That was our hardest set, I think.
Yeah, it was. And I literally remember thinking, because you guys were playing Dig, and I think Dig at the time, they were not known for necessarily like adapting well mid-tournament. And I remember thinking like, Splice is going to 3-0 them. Like they're going to make the finals, like 100%. I was so confident in that. I did, Spin still will remind me of this sometimes, I did think Rival was going to beat you guys in the final. I was very wrong about that. I just thought that team was nuts. But yeah, I remember watching that team, and I really wanted to ask both of you about this, is like, I've said this to Max before, where Max being Aror, that is the first team I've ever seen in Smite that really reminded me of like a way a professional like basketball team or something would play. Like I felt like you guys had... Everybody on that team had a role that they played and like understood what they were going to do. Like Divios was playing a guardian or some sort of like facilitative character that could like burn beads, rotate well, be a super good team fight presence. Like everybody I know, like from the outside perspective, everybody would be like, oh yeah, like Divios is not a good laner or whatever, but it's not what he was playing for at all. Like he was always playing to be a really good team fighter, to be a really good frontliner presence. Like Maswal would kind of just eat shit on your guys' team. Like, he wouldn't get a lot of the farm. He'd literally sit mid. His job was to not die and press Opwash and Zeus ult off of Naja ults and stuff. And I felt like the way you guys played, like, Sino was always like a jungler who could gank and heavily pressure, and Cyclone was... Same thing with you. You were always like a Fenrir and RDO, something that could be super annoying. You would just drop horrific on people and just try to dive. And Cyclone was always just like the carry, you know? Like, he was a Freya or a Shablanke or something. He was getting fed. I remember thinking like, I've never seen a team work that well where everybody understood their role and they played it really, really well. Like everybody was on the same page. Everybody played it so cleanly. Like, for example, like when we won Worlds, it just felt like we were just like better than people kind of. And it's not like a fulfilling feeling in the way that like, I feel like the strategy of the game really took a big leap with you guys that year, because I feel like you really changed a lot of things of like, we have a strategy, we know what we want to do, and we're going to execute it, and like you can't stop us. And it like, for example, that Obey set, I literally remember seeing you play Fenrir the following, or no, he was Fenrir,
yeah,
and Sino had played Naja, and I remember looking at Raffer's first relic, and it wasn't beads, and I was like, yeah, they lost. Like, instantly, I was like, they lost. Like, yeah. I just knew they had no shot. And, yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah, no, I'll let you take it first.
Yeah, I do remember the prep for that set being like, it was like kind of stressful because Prime like randomly last second like off the top rope showed up,
Oh yeah, he was literally having his kid.
and Prime was literally the only other mid laner that we knew would play both Opwatch and Zeus,
Right.
and like do it good.
So we knew the draft was going to be the hardest against that team.
Yeah.
So like prepping for that team was like super stressful because we had to come up with the scenarios in which we were like super okay with the way the draft was going. And our practice leading up to that LAN was like not usable.
Yeah, so let's rewind it. I want to talk about this. Like, so we boot camped and we went to Rochester, and the Splice. I love Splice. They were like probably the greatest org I played under. But like that boot camp, they put us in the basement and they gave us throttled internet, and that means we were all on like 130 ping, and the computers they gave us didn't stay at 60 FPS in team fights. So we were playing on like really, really rough setups, and we were double and triple blocking every single day.
Was that during the stretch? We literally played a day, and you guys were like 1-18 against us. We played like 19
Well, no,
scrims.
that was like...
was every day.
That was every
sure,
day. Yeah, I think we beat you guys maybe a total of like 2 times.
We had one day where we slammed you guys because Divios was so tilty. He's like, I'll just play Geb. And then
that was a wrap for us.
And then Benji got absolutely ass blasted.
That's
for 3
when we
hours.
started getting Geba Wheelixed off cooldown, and I was like, because I remember Sino would play Naja, and I'd be like, okay, like if I have to buy beads, I'll buy beads. Like I would stubbornly like buy beads, and then the Geba Wheelix came, and I was like, I don't really want to buy beads because I don't even see this Geb, and then he would be at my red buff at like 8 minutes. And I was like, okay, against Sino, I just gotta buy beads. Like he's just gonna. I remember like you guys started to form like there were like 3 comps that you had, and Benji and I got owned by all of them. Like we got farmed.
Yeah, that was that was like the one good day. So like we're arriving to Worlds, and like it was tough because we're not like typically big believers in like this like scrim meta thing.
Yeah.
But we knew that like we had hit like the thing.
Yeah.
So we'd be scrimming not just you guys but other teams.
Yep.
But we'd be like, well, we can't do that. So we would just play like.
Oh, you guys wouldn't do the start versus them.
No.
Yeah, that's what we did as well. Yeah.
So we would just play normal Smite, and it was useless because from the minute we loaded in the draft, they're like, well, we can't do that. Well, we can't do that. And it was like, well, why are we doing this? And it was like to see what they're doing.
Dude, we played against Dig the week before Worlds. We played against Dig, and I don't remember if they were first in EU. I think they were first in EU at the time.
They were the favorites to win that year or whatever.
Yeah. And I remember we scrimmed them, and we didn't show anything. And we basically just sandbagged them. Looking back at it, we essentially sandbagged them.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And I remember people were telling us in like the lobby, people were like, oh yeah, Dig's been talking so much trash about how they like owned you guys every scrim or whatever. And it just reinforced the thought, like, when they played you guys in that semi, I was so sure that they'd be so overconfident and just like completely write you guys off, where I was like, they are so screwed. Like, they have no idea what's about to happen.
Dude, I remember game 1 went really well, like the start. So then I think they copied it game 2, right?
I think Drix picked like
he played Fenrir.
and he just tried to go to
And
a
he
purple.
he inted, didn't he?
He cowabunga'd over the wall.
Yeah.
And Divios is like, what is he doing? Just kill him.
Yeah.
And we killed him. It was so funny.
When Divios would say that, it was music to my ears. I was never more sure we'd win a game than when Divios was like, what's this idiot doing?
That's so good, man.
Yeah, he's like, just kill him. What? We just jumped in. Like, what? He was like so confused. And
I think that was the game that we did the rat start too. So like they lost their support and then Zeros died within 0.5 seconds.
Yeah.
And we were just up 2-0 to start.
I feel like that team also was so in their head at the time. Like if they had a bad start at a tournament, like especially around Worlds, they were so in their head.
Yeah.
Unlucky for them, good for you guys.
It was great for us. Always
Yeah.
great for us. There was so many things because it was like that was when ADCs were going like Boots Poison Star, and you had like 10% crit chance, and you know you're gonna win when Cyclone just dash autos someone, and he's like gonna die if it doesn't crit, and it crits and he wins. And it's like, okay.
He knew it was going to.
Of course he knew.
Yeah.
That's like when stuff like that's happening, you're like, we just win today.
That's the spinner gap. That's just what happens.
Sometimes you just know when you're winning that day.
Yeah.
That was a very much we're winning that day moment.
Moswell, you always laugh about Moswell saying getting pumped up after he killed Cubo Fred the one time.
I've never heard. He's get fucking shit on Cubo.
Moswell said that. No way.
Fucking slammed his fucking arches.
I've never heard Moswell say that in my life. I love that.
Dude, everyone was just like, yes, Moswell, let's go.
That's so good. Oh my god.
I love when Moswell talks trash. It's
You hear
the
Sino
best.
in the background like, don't forget to buy Discord.
and Divine.
Yeah, Divine.
Moswell hated buying Divine. I think every mid laner in the history of Smite
They hate it so much.
hates buying Divine Rune, but it is the most broken item in the game.
Broken.
I still hear Sino saying build Mantle of Discord in my sleep. I have never heard someone say something more often to someone in my life.
He said it to Moswell.
And
Yeah.
then Moswell would hear it 100 times in a game and then not purchase the item.
I feel like that's got to be a spite.
And then if we lost, you'll never guess what came next. Moswell, why didn't you buy that?
Unlucky. So I'm kind of curious. Did you have anything else on season 5?
No, we can go to season 6 now. Yeah.
Yeah. So season 6, we kind of covered it a little bit last week when we were talking about the initial move down here. So our first episode, we kind of talked about, our expectations moving to a LAN league and having everyone in person. I think that's something you guys probably experienced a little bit with the beach house. I'm kind of curious, from your perspective, did that change the role that you played on the team as a coach? Like, did you feel like your job was easier, harder? Like, what did in-person teams at LAN all the time in Georgia, like, what did that mean to you as a coach?
I mean, we kind of just had a head start on it, right? Like,
We were here so early. Yeah.
that, and like we had like kind of ironed out like the things that like we should do in Jersey.
Mhm.
And like Jersey, it was easier in that like we had access to a lot of stuff to
What do you mean by that? The things you should do? Like, was that like scrim practice or like hanging
how
out?
to schedule scrims, how to like be around each other, like going out, and like how important it was, like even if you're just going to get groceries, right? Like having stuff that you're doing together.
Yeah, just do it together. Yeah.
And it was like I got like a new car to be able to do it. Like I got like a bigger car.
Yeah.
And it was like, we already kind of knew the trials and tribulations of it. The problem was that we just couldn't get everyone here.
Yeah.
Because Divios had issues with his visa. It was so weird because he had to keep sending back extra information. I forget. I don't know how the process works exactly for visas.
I feel like it was so unlucky for some people because some people got it really quick, and for Divios especially, he's somebody who's been going back and forth. I mean, he was playing in season 1, right? And everyone was like, "Oh yeah, he'll be fine."
Yeah,
and he's also like Canadian, which you'd think is like easier to get than like a European visa, like anywhere. But like he just had to keep sending back additional information, and he had to keep going in for all these visa meetings, and like it just wasn't working out for some reason. So it took him so long to get it.
Yeah.
Now that I'm on the other side of things, it would not shock me that because of the beach house stuff we did the year before, and then he also won Worlds within that same time frame. It would not surprise me if that's what led to it being delayed. To be honest, just having to constantly be like, "Why were you here? What were you doing? Prove it."
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense.
Yeah, I never thought about that. Does
Yeah.
make sense. Yeah.
So, yeah, but I mean, we were here really early. We were scrimming SSG, which would, they would prove to have their like disaster year,
Yeah.
the coffin year. And that was like, we were just like super owning them to the point where like I think almost every year the champion team always got kind of complacent. I don't think maybe Kings this year are a little bit different, but I think historically, like you win Worlds and you're just kind of like, I'm him.
Mhm.
Kind of like do whatever you feel like doing, and it doesn't work out that way because once you start winning, you're now the most studied team. Like you have to try really, really
You have the
hard.
target on your back,
Yeah,
basically.
it happens both ways. Even like even for the Kings now, like, I mean, kickoff tournament. Like, I don't know. Hearing them, I don't think they would feel the same way. Like, they definitely do not feel like they're at Worlds form, for example. Like, they had a good like opening week, but I know like for us coming off of Worlds, we were like 0-3. Like we were instantly. I died to arachne webs on a red buff. Like it happens. It just it happens.
Ocean's mid sub took you down.
Was he mid?
Yeah,
I thought he was ADC.
He played Soul mid sub.
Who played ADC? So, whoever played ADC soloed Max. I'm pretty sure he was solo ADC. No, dude, he was solo ADC. I swear to God, he was solo ADC.
I'm just telling you, it was Soul mid.
I know. All I know is Max got soloed by him. Maybe they like lane swapped or something. I know Max got soloed by him though. Max being Panic
Ocean's
at the
put
time.
on a show.
He did. He farmed us. Yeah. But yeah, I remember like I remember going into it was really uncommon. Like your guys' post world slump wasn't like a in-game slump. Like I don't know how Sino feels about this, but like playing against him, I would say like not that he's not good now, but like I remember Sino being nuts. Like early spring split season 6, I remember like I felt like he was the best player in the world at the time. Like I think
He was owning.
yeah, he
You
was
know,
going
was so good.
he was going crazy at that time, and like you guys weren't playing bad. I just felt like it was like a lot of team drama and stuff like that. So I'm kind of curious as your perspective, where that was probably something that you initially helped with so much on that team. Like, what do you feel like? Did you feel like your role changed? Did you feel like it was harder? Are there things like you guys look back on that you kind of wish was different, or how did that go?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was tough for like a multitude of reasons. We might be one of the first teams at that, especially at that point after Worlds, to like come together and be like, "Are we doing it again?"
Yeah.
And I think that looking back on it, like it's kind of hard to ask a group of people after like we just won the big event
Yeah.
to like kind of make that decision like level-headedly.
Yeah.
But like me and Aror were usually kind of in the loop of what was going on with the team, and we were not this time. But I remember we sat down, I mean, everyone wanted to still play together, and everyone said yes. Well, not everyone meant yes.
But they didn't really mean it.
Yeah.
And that was key information that we would come to find out as the phase went on.
And like losing never helps either. I feel like because we lost our first 2 sets because we used Sot, I think, against you guys. It was like Sot's SPL debut.
Yeah.
We had him in as a sub, and then we played the dig and we lost Fire Giant 3 times
To
in a
Khepri
row.
and,
To
like-
Khepri, to Jormungandr.
I remember the Yorm one.
And then Divios got like a 4-man Hades all, and Maswell was playing Poseidon, and he didn't crack in over the wall. And then, oh my god, there's so many bad things that happened that set.
Yeah, it was weird too because I think that was like the first time because like, we had like a lot of like things going on our team, but there was never like one individual person that would get like a target painted on their back, right? But now that like you could see like it got kind of clicky because we were originally in a beach house and then we were in like separate apartments and then someone was also like wasn't here. So like
that was a big problem, I feel like.
Yeah, so like it got like really clicky and it was happening kind of like outside of where I would see it because it was me and Cyclone in the 1-3 bedroom waiting for Divios to come and then everyone else in the other one. And people, I think, didn't want to believe it could change because it would be easier to replace someone. And historically in Smite, I do think
I think especially at that time that
when a
tended
roster
to be
is
true.
super struggling, like it isn't worth the time investment and like it is like literally like a mental anguish to like figure it out because like people are not willing to meet in the middle, so you have to figure out who's willing to compromise where and kind of get them to the right place. And then ultimately the way it all went down was it's funny now. It was not funny then though.
Yeah, no, I remember that very vividly.
Yeah, so the one thing that I took away from it mainly is like I went back because I was like when we played SPL like every like 2 to 3 weeks. I was in the
best
camp.
of fives, yeah.
Best of
I loved
fives.
that.
I like that schedule. I was a big fan. Like
I loved it.
I thought it was cool because it was more like the NFL kind of where like you'd have like matches, not every weekend, but it would be like maybe like 1 or 2 like this
I felt like
weekend
it was like
for this
really
team.
good tournament prep too.
Yeah.
Is how I always felt.
That was probably my favorite SPL schedule. Like
Same.
looking back, that entire year that schedule was sick. I feel like, and like. So I would go back home and scrim from home because like could just come back and forth. And I remember I went back home and then that's when everything went wrong. So we lost to Dig and we didn't have another set, I think, for like, was it like
2 weeks? 2
weeks or something? 3 weeks maybe?
And Divios was still in Canada at the time?
No, he was there.
Oh, he was here? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah, so I remember I went back and Sino and it was mainly Sino was like didn't really want to like we had a conversation like that like it was not just working out between the two of them and so I went back and then I feel like it got worse when I went back home and I wasn't there because like he had no one to talk to about it, and like I feel like when I was there, he'd at least talk to me. So it's funny because the next year after that, I remember the COVID year happened.
Yeah.
And I had a chance to go back home, I remember. And the reason why I stayed with the team and didn't go back, because I could have easily played that COVID year like
For sure.
from my house.
Yeah.
But like I didn't want the same thing to happen where I go back home and then like the team just
It just blows up.
evaporates, like, well, I'm gone or whatever. So that year was really hard for me, but like I learned a lesson, I guess, from that year to like make sure I was present. So if something happens, I'm there to at least help as best as I can.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that happened, and then we ended up like Moswell and Sino both left, and then we ended up getting Scream because Scream just finished high school.
Yep.
Scream graduated high school the same day as my brother. Like their graduations were the same
that's
day.
so cool.
Because I was at home, I remember, because I was like, yeah, I'm at my brother's graduation when I was like messaging in the group chat. And he's like, yeah, I'm at mine too. And I thought that was so funny. and yeah, so he just graduated and then he moved down, and then Ven
He was on SSG, right?
SSG, and they weren't doing too hot, so they got rid of him, and that's when they picked up Sino, because like you said, everybody thought Sino was, and he was
playing so well.
He was like insane.
He was a machine.
Yeah,
he was crazy.
And so they got him, and we got Ven, and it just worked out well, I guess, for us. Divios like didn't really vibe. Like it was just the whole thing. Like Divios was just in such a bad.
It was an impossible situation.
Yeah, like this is a good point. Like part we could talk about narratives. Like the narrative around Divios was that like he was a hard teammate to work with, and like he was so toxic or whatever. Like that was the narrative coming in, and that's what Ven and Scream like thought, and that's what they heard.
Were going into it like, oh no, this is how he
this is so like everything was kind of against Divios in my opinion, so it just didn't work out.
So if Divios had a time where like to him he was just like venting, they'd be like, oh, he's toxic.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's just like no matter what Divios would do or say in that situation, I feel like the narrative was already painted. Like that's what people think, and like that's like a big thing. Like in any competition, like if you get a narrative painted on you, like it's really hard to like get out of that narrative. And like one thing I wanted to talk about, we were talking about a little bit yesterday when we were planning for the podcast, was like with Benji last year. Like everybody thought Benji was like the most useless coach. He was just there for the paycheck. He did nothing. But like I'm not going to sit here and say he was the greatest coach of all time, but he definitely did a lot of stuff for the team. And he was like, he was here for the LAN. Like when we won in spring last year, like he was the one who helped us make all the adjustments to win, I feel like, because he had such a good insight into the game that you wouldn't get from anybody else, I feel like, especially with playing with us from last year.
Yeah, I mean, not only is he like one of the best solo laners to ever play, but he also is somebody who had a lot of
he's just a smart,
hands-on experience with you
Smite
guys.
Player.
Yeah, and he's very smart.
Yeah, so he helped us a lot, and like Divios got that narrative painted on him that he was just like the most toxic person ever, and like he was impossible to work with, and like if that happens to someone, like it's really hard to break out of that, I feel like. So it just sucks for like it sucked for him. So we ended up replacing Divios, so that's when we got Baskin, and I feel like for me, like that was one of the hardest, man. Season, thinking about it now, like season 6 and 7, that was like
a rough time.
That was a rough patch for me. Holy cow! Like,
season 6 was miserable.
Yeah, well, you think season 6 was miserable? I wish you got to participate in season 7. That was like season 6 was like the pilot episode to like the most disastrous show on the planet for season 7. That's basically what season 6 was. But like when Baskin came in, I feel like it really invigorated us as like a team. That's how I felt, at least. Like he gave me like a lot of confidence, which helped me a lot, and I feel like it helped the team just in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because what you say about Divios is true too. Like you have to do so much work, and at that point we were already pretty low. And people already had an opinion, and the amount of effort he would have had to put in to overturn that was not something that he was mentally in a place to do. none of us were able to do it because it's hard to justify what's happening to new people when it's already caused the problems it has. And it is true that we were playing on like a less strict schedule, but we were still on a timer. That's sort of the hard thing about being in a league is if you're going to make a change, you really don't have time to like navigate it. If it's going to happen, it's going to be kind of sloppy because you need it to happen as soon as possible so your record can be as good as possible so that you can...
Well, your sample size is so much smaller at that stage as well because we were playing single round robin best of 5. So it's like, like nowadays, if we're playing 2 best of 3s, maybe you could lose one and be like, okay, what do we learn from this? What do we want to adjust? Like doing that mid set is a lot harder than like midweek or mid weekend where you can like take a step back and really think about it. Like mid set, people emotions are higher because maybe like you disagree on what you lost to or why you lost. And I feel like it only like fuels that fire of like the time pressure thing, even if it's a new change, like nobody's going to treat it that way. Like it's like an urgency thing. So
it just turned into like, and this is something I've sort of been relearning in the past few months too, is like your time constraint is very much so like it's an in your head thing.
Yeah.
Like the more you focus you put on it and the more you worry about it, the more real it becomes. And even if you compare it to like a fuse, right? Even if it goes off, if it blows up in your face, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the times when you're on that time crunch, it can seem like the entire world is based on whether or not this thing blows up. So at that time, I'm super panicking because I'm also talking with Splice and they're being pretty tough about this because we've just lost 2 people. One of which like we could have accounted for, the other one we couldn't have, and now like we might need to make a third one, and like there's trying to send people out to try and like do something. I don't really know what.
But it's hard because like they were not in it, so like they didn't see the whole story basically. So that's why it's always really hard for them especially to help us fix the issues that we were having.
And then I think like when it came down to it, it was really like depressing to have like lost like those were our boys, like I didn't want to lose any of them, let alone 3 of them.
I mean, when you win worlds with the team, it's like even without like having it be spoken, it's still like an attachment. Like I'm sure you've maybe even felt it with Sino last year where like you just know how each other like thinks or how each other plays, and like you just have that built-in like synergy and trust that it's really hard to rebuild and to replace that.
Yeah, for sure.
We were lucky that I think you're right. Like Baskin was like he was very relaxed. He's like a very plug and play player because he's just good.
Yeah.
And he's not stressing about it in the way that we had been stressing about it for 2 months at that point. And that was like we just really needed to just like breathe, and he gave us that.
I mean, because to him, he was like focusing on school.
This was the summer job.
Yeah, exactly. It was literally a summer job for him.
He's like, I'm just here to play Smite and have a good time.
Yeah, he's like, I can play solo lane for 3 months and own everybody. Why not?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean that was tough. And then like I wasn't gonna talk about it with anyone either at that point because like everyone had already been. It was like it like saturated everything, It was like in the air. Like you'd step in and it felt negative for a while. So it was like, I'm just not gonna address this within the team. But that's bad too. Like you just got to get it out of your system. I know at some point I came across like I didn't care that it had happened, and like that was super not true. But it is like a weird line to walk when it comes to that kind of stuff.
I want to talk about maybe a more positive end of that you just kind of reminded me of, where, the other perspective that you have within Smite is being an admin. And as both of you have addressed, you had a rough season 6, not even necessarily performance-wise, because again, like you guys lost in quarter of worlds, but in my opinion, you guys were the favorite leading up to that tournament.
We were definitely the favorite.
We had a really good year.
I think most people considered you guys the favorite and the best team going into that. And you then become an admin for season 7. That also becomes the COVID year. You're again now currently an admin, and you took one break year. I guess season 8, you had coached us on the Dragons.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of curious, like throughout that process of becoming an admin for a year, then being a coach for a year, and now being an admin for 2 straight years, do you think, was there anything that you took from that year in season 7 that you felt like applied to you in coaching? Did it help you take a step back? Did it apply to coaching, I guess, in the way where you could help a team where you're on a more outside perspective? Something that Max and I talked about a little bit yesterday is there's sometimes narratives around different teams having different strengths or weaknesses, and I feel like if you're really removed from that and you're not within those teams, I'm kind of wondering, like, the way you viewed that, did anything change, or was it just like a break?
I was super ready to just like be on a break. So like once I was not coaching anymore, like going into season 7,
Yeah.
I was like, that's like I'm not thinking about this game competitively ever again. Like
Nice.
that's where I was at.
You were detoxing
I was
yourself,
like, I'm
yeah.
washing my hands of this. I remember I would talk about this with Sino, but I was like, if I am done with Smite, I'm gonna delete my social. I want to be untrackable. I do not want to be tied to this ever. And then, I'm doing the admin stuff, and it was like really eye-opening. There's a lot that goes into it. Like there's most days I wake up, I've gotten finally to people to like listen to like my work hours, which has been a 3-year process.
I mean, it's really hard too, especially like
when stuff happens, they've decided I gotta know then, and I gotta know.
Well, that, and I've also been a big offender of this, where it's just like I'm just comfortable like saying whatever, whenever, and like when you're on the clock, that's a little different,
Yeah,
there's not the boundary.
And it's tough because like I have ended up being friends with a lot of people, so I want to help them not like as an admin, but as a friend.
Right.
And if it's in my position as an admin to take care of it anyway, I should do that. But it got to a point where like I was always on, like, because I was stupid and I used like my personal Discord for everything. I should have made a work one. But now, like, I'm not going to restart everything. I'm not going to rejoin all these other things and like undo personal Discord. I'm not going to do that. But it became like so stressful because I felt like same thing I was talking about with the fuse. Like, I felt like I had a bunch of little bombs around my head, and they were always about to explode. And I'm just like trying to like put out the fuses with my fingertips like this all around all the time. And no matter what I did, people weren't happy. I'd like solve it, and they'd be like, "Okay."
Literally impossible.
There was like
to
a
make
new
everybody
problem,
happy.
and they were mad at me again.
Impossible.
Like they were cool with me for like 30 minutes, and then it was just like bam.
Or just be another person just from the top ropes, like,
Yeah, exactly. And,
What about this thing?
and it was like, like you try to solve it fast, but then you would solve it wrong because the things that you thought were true were no longer true, or the things that you thought were right were not right. And you're trying to, give people the answer that they need rather than the answer they want, but you're also trying to get the result that they want. It's a lot of a balancing act. And then, I got to the end of the year, and it was also with COVID, so I'm like, my brain is leaking out of my skull at this point because people have more free time than ever before, and that is being directed at me.
Yeah.
So, I got to the end of the year, and I was like, I got like an offer to coach a team. That's a bit cooler. I'm going to go do that.
Yeah.
And what I brought with me was like, I was a lot more organized. I didn't end up upkeeping it because our scrims ended up not having valuable data. So maintaining it became a source of incredible misinformation.
Yeah.
So I thought keeping that up to date after a certain point was actually bad because we had stuff that we knew was good that we had like a 10% win rate on across 30 games or something. And stuff that we knew was bad that we were constantly winning on. And I was like, yeah, this is not usable.
It's hard to convince people.
Can
Can you kind of talk about like that process of, so at the end of being an admin, the COVID year,
yeah,
and you wanted to go into coaching, I remember talking to you about this a good bit because I think the other option that you would have coached if it wasn't us on the Dragons would have been the Radiance team, right? Or I guess the Titans then is what they became. Yeah. I'm just used to calling it Radiance. But the Titans team. And I remember for me, it was almost weird where I felt like I think there was a lot of respect for you within the pro scene in terms of like your communication skills, as we've mentioned, but also you do have the background of a former competitive player, pro player, all that type of stuff, and you've been around for a long time. So a lot of the inner workings of like not only the communication, but how do you make scrims productive? I felt like a lot of that was kind of built in. And I remember going into the Dragons year, I wanted a lot of help with trying to get people on the same page. Like when we had replaced Twig, I knew that there was going to be gaps that need to fill in because like Twig and I could handle a lot of the things of like, here's how we're going to be punctual. Here's how we're going to be professional. Here's how we we show up to scrims this many minutes early. Like you wake up, you eat, you talk, you like whatever. Like we do stuff together, all that type of stuff. And I felt like that infrastructure kind of fell down around you and not like fell down in front of you, not around you. It fell down in front of you. And I felt like it was a really tough year because I felt like you were faced with a challenge of, because you weren't with a familiar group of like Aror and Cyclone, you like had things you knew you were good at that we were kind of expecting you to help with, but with people that you're unfamiliar with.
I mean, it was tough too because like I was really burnt out from I was just dealing with kids all the time, and I was like, these guys are like grown-ups. Like most of them are like I think Max was the youngest one, and he turned 21 that year, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say either 21
but
or
everyone
22.
was like an adult.
Yep.
So I didn't think it would require as much effort. But I came into that year, and it was, I remember it being kind of weird because the things that there was already a division, right? Because the things that you wanted to work on and fix were not what other people wanted to work on and fix.
Yeah.
One thing that I remember being very confused about is that, I guess not confused about, I understood the reasoning, but I didn't think it was the right diagnosis, was you guys wanted to move away from just being like the early game team. Like you would always like say like air quotes and like talk about it like it was the worst thing in the world. But one, you guys were super good at it. Two, we defaulted to that in spring and we owned.
Yep, won a tournament.
And three, things falling short at Worlds were not the result of anything like that.
Yeah.
But I hard committed to wanting to help with that change because it was what the team wanted.
Yeah.
Misplay by me.
I mean, it was really hard because from my perspective, I'd say season 7 as like I mean, it was honestly just a really good year for me in general, like even in spite of COVID. Like that was a lot of like my weight loss journey at the time. Like, look how that went. My weight loss journey at the time was going really well. And I just felt super good physically. I felt super good mentally. And that was probably the most effort. Like, I feel like I normally try to work pretty hard. That was like turbo. Like that was like, I felt so drained because I felt like I gave it my everything, and that like that finals loss was really like crushing to me, just like in terms of like just energy, like not even just emotionally, but like I could literally feel like I needed a break. Like I needed a break. And I remember that was a really big motivation for having Herwind and you, were like, these are two people that like I consider friends. They're two people who I love being around. Like I enjoy talking to them, and I feel like they can be like super helpful with like a team environment of everything. And I knew I needed help with that. And I felt like I was trying so hard. Like I was in my own head in a different way where I was like, I always had issues on that team with like the way we thought or the way that we addressed like people would, like Sam, for example. Sam was insane at like playing early game leads and like just being a playmaker and carrying, but he didn't like the label of being an early game jungle, so he like actively fought against that. And I'm like, okay, like I'm down to like try to help with this stuff. And that it just created like this really big rift of like, I have these goals that we all want to accomplish. I have these things that we want to work on long term, but like it was like a constant like reluctance to like commit to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think if I had to like if you were like write a 30-word sentence that describes what happened, it would be people weren't like satisfied with just winning anymore. Like they wanted to do it a specific way, even if it was like antithetical to what they had had success with previously. And I think like, you know, diversifying your portfolio and expanding is good for, like, I think probably, you know, after that year, a lot of good things came from that. Like that was like a growth year for everyone.
Yeah, for sure.
It's just that year happened to be, and realistically, and I always have to remind myself this, even though that year did not go as well as would have been expected, that we still had a better year that year than a lot of pro players have had, period.
And you guys also won a tournament. So
Yeah,
it's
that's
not
what I mean.
Yeah.
Like winning a tournament, like regardless if it's Worlds or not, is still very hard to do. Like any tournament for Smite, with how the format's set up, like there's 3 to 4 big tournaments a year, depending on the season that you played in. like if you're able to win one of those tournaments, like it's a successful year, hands down.
It's why I get so annoyed at like I think I've mentioned it before, like even the culture around like rings and like the NBA or traditional sports, like you have to take pride in like those steps along the way. Like it's not easy to win a split or to win a tournament or well, like it's really hard to sustain, like to have sustained like competitive play and be at the top of it. Like you have to constantly adapt and change and all that type of stuff. And I think it was really hard because there was just so much. It carried over to season 9 as well. Like there was just so much pressure on that team that if they lost a certain way, like we all really like felt it, you know. And it was just like a preconceived, like we would roll over people and there'd be games where we're like nice, and then like we'd literally win that way. We won the tournament that way, and we're like, but how do we get better as a team? And it wasn't like. It was like, we have to get better at this thing that we think we're bad at that feels totally unfamiliar or whatever. And it was just like, the mind games are already ahead. Like, they're already against us. And it was really difficult because, in my opinion, that summer split was, like, perfect for us. Like, I wanted to play, like, weird, like, utility mages on Hurry. Like, he played a lot of Jansen stuff. That's what I wanted to do. Like, I wanted him to play, like, Hell and Afro and that type of stuff. And I know, like, you guys had played a lot of, like, Hell and Erlang, and it was literally like 2v2 mid jungle, run it down, like full pressure. And I was like, this is awesome for us. Like, I thought Hurry was like a pretty good Hell player. Like, he had played it in the past. Like, it made sense. And we were just like, nah, we got to get better at late game. And we got rolled every game. We just got rolled.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the one thing I would like to say, though, is like, I really enjoyed my time on the Dragons. And you guys were actually a lot better at the late game stuff that I think you guys ever gave yourself credit for. It's just that when you get to 30, 35 plus minutes, it takes a single mistake.
Yeah.
And like, I think that was like the thing that was hard to accept, is that like, we'd be reviewing it like, we just got to late game again and we lost. And it's like, well, no, like we just had like a single critical error.
Yep.
And like that just happens. But it could have just as easily happened to the other team.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to, like, it was hard because everyone was being really, really hard on themselves, and there wasn't a way to navigate it because that was the one thing that they've, like, it was kind of like the ghosts of season 6 and season 7.
It was really hard for
right?
me and Sam, especially because I think like the year prior, Sam and I did such a good job of like really trying to get along. Like we'd just talk to each other, like me, him, and Twig, we'd talk together like every single day. We'd have a plan going into scrims. We'd have idea of what we wanted to do stuff. And I think Sam and I had a lot of like personal like IRL stress outside of Smite, and like the communication between us fell apart. And once that happened, like we both were friends with you and like could talk to you about it. But I think like it was so hard to get us. It comes back to getting everybody on the same page.
Yeah.
Even in a situation where like I still love Sam. Like I mean, it's like memed because we like kicked him last year or whatever. But like I love Sam. Like Sam is still one of my favorite people. I've like always felt like you're somebody that I could easily like talk to. Like we're all still friends, but even in that case, like it's hard to be on the same page at all times.
Yeah, and I mean the tough part was like, it wasn't like you guys weren't like you, Sam, and Hurry were like some of the best teammates ever to each other, I felt like. And then Alec and Max were always like super understanding. Like you guys were like a cohesive unit.
Yeah.
It was just, like at some points, like we would talk for a really long time, and that team was just like, it wasn't one of those teams that could sit there and listen for 2 or 3 hours. And
that for sure.
That's fine. That's how some teams are. A lot of teams are probably like that. But like the way we were trying to solve it, and I think, sometimes the way that things got directed, it led to more significant stress for different people. And I feel like each week one person took like turns, like,
oh yeah,
like taking on that stress. And, that would be the person that would have like a rough week. And then it would, it was always just like the tale of like 4 players playing like above expectations, and then someone else like falling short of their own.
Yeah.
And then it just kept looping.
Did you feel like on that team, because it was a different group of people, did you feel like that presented new challenges to you as a coach, where maybe the way that you had to address problems with like me might be different than the way you would address problems with like Max, for example?
I don't think I realized it till it was like too late.
Yeah.
Really. Because it just got to a point where like the solutions that we could have used were like, it was just, I do remember like one time because when you and Sam would come together to do picks and bans,
Mm-hmm.
you guys at some point, it just seemed like you guys were just arguing with each other to like argue with each other.
Oh yeah,
and
we
that,
loved
that
it.
would happen with us too. But that's why like it would be like 3 of us doing picks and bans and then getting feedback from everyone else. So I was like suggesting that we do picks and bans separately, and where you guys
I
were
remember that,
where
yeah.
you guys were overlap, it would be good. And I think because both of you did not want to accept that that was an issue at the time, you both were just like, no, that's a waste of time.
Yeah, I do remember that, and I think it would have been good. Yeah.
But
Hindsight's 2020.
stuff, yeah, stuff like
It's
that.
easier to look back though and say
Yeah.
like it could have been so easy.
Yeah.
It was just, I think everyone really, really wanted to resolve things and like have like a winning year, and I think that at the core of it was what everyone wanted. So it just took like, a little bit more work than we were able to sort out at the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I still look back on that team really fondly because it was really fun.
I mean, same. Yeah.
And like, I grew a lot from that. And I think I had some really good, like Hurry is still like one of like my favorite people I've ever worked with ever.
Love that guy.
And it's very different like talking with him like on a team versus like when I had talked with him off of it.
Yeah.
I have such a significantly greater respect and perspective of him as a person as a result of it. Like he's one of my favorite people ever.
Yeah.
And it's like not particularly close.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It was I learned a lot that year. And then I wasn't sure if I wanted to just be done with Smite in general.
Mm-hmm.
And then I waited too long and I was like, I'll just get a job at High Res while I sort out my life, and we're here.
Nice. So I have a question for you. Like what's like the biggest like similarity that you could draw between like me and Mike just from coaching us? Like I'm curious to hear what you say about that, because I feel like we're both really different of like how we approach things. It seems like
You're different in your approach, but you are equally as stubborn in your desire to defend your point. Aror will always guide you to his answer, no matter how long it takes, but he will not let you deviate from his path under any conditions. And I think that's actually really good because it helps you get the understanding that you're looking for. And you're the same way in that, like going through picks and bans with you, I had no problem conceding to the points you had, and we would have a good back and forth.
Yeah.
But there were other times where like other people on the team would interject, and you'd be like, "No, man," and then that would turn into like the talking point. And I think those talking points can be really productive. It was just that we would not get the link in the. It would turn into we'll agree to disagree a lot of the time, and then we'd commit to a plan, and then people would half-ass on one end or the other, or it would just not work out in the way that we envisioned it. But I think that stubbornness is a really good strength, because if you think you're right and you commit to it, you either one, learn you're not right and you grow from it, or you are right and you win. And I think those things are actually what I find most valuable in the people that I've coached. Is a stubbornness is important for me because it expands my ideas on the game. And I think I need someone who's like that in order for me to do my job better. So I'm more willing to concede to other people's points than I should be.
Yeah, I mean, the way I've always thought of it is like, you kind of have to have like an idea or like a premise or something to like, I guess maybe what you're saying about Aurora is like maybe he has like a vision, he can't like explain it, but he can like get you there kind of thing. And like, for me, I'm more of a person where like I could explain to people what I'm thinking, but I've something I've learned now, and I definitely wasn't good at it when I was playing with that Dragons team even, and like something I'm learning more this year is like I could talk for days to like my current teammates and tell them like, this is what I think is good, here's why, here's what I want you to do. Like I could write them paragraphs on and on, but like you kind of got to like not talk them to death and like show them what you want to do. And I feel like getting everyone on that same page, it like, for me, I'm just like a very logical thinker. Like if you were like, hey Mike, I need you to do this because of this, I'm like, okay. Like, and not everyone is like, it's not like nothing is either good or bad, it's just different.
Yeah, I mean I do come from like, before I was in Smite, I was going to be a teacher, and like there are 3 types of learners. There's visual, there's vocal, and then there's like hands-on.
Yeah.
And like you're really good at hearing something and understanding it. Most Smite players are not. I myself, like most of the time when you tell me something, I would almost always ask you, like, can you show me?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people aren't fully aware of like how they best learn and understand information.
It's really important.
So they'll
Genuinely.
listen to you because it's important that your teammates feel like they're being listened to. But just because I think people get stuck on like in one ear out the other. But it's not because they're not trying to process the information. It's just the words are going in and they're getting like a fuzzy screen in their head. Like there's nothing there.
I mean, that's why it gets frustrating because like from my perspective, like I think I was a little hard on like Sam that year, for example, because like Sam is like, I know how Sam learns. Like Sam is he's a feel guy. He's like, he has to like feel it. He has to like do it in game. He's a gut feel guy. And I feel like it was like this constant tension where I'm like, I'm telling you this, and like I really think it'd be good for both of us, and like he needs time to feel it out, and then like it's like we're lagging behind each other, you know, like as one of us is starting to get it, the other one's not, and it was really tough.
Yeah, and I think you have to go through a year like that so you can get to the better part later.
Yeah,
it sucks really bad when you're going through it the first time, for sure.
Yeah, any year that's hard, you definitely just learn a lot from. Like for me, like season 7, like in the future, like me and Mike were talking about doing an episode like this because I feel like it's funny because like season 6 and prior compared to season 7 postseason, I'm like a completely different player than I was like from season 6 before to season 7 and now. And it's funny because like all the new casters and a lot of the new Smite fans have only seen me for like my season 7 and onwards.
Yeah, true.
So that's like what I'm known for now, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just you learn things from playing on different teams and working with different people. And I feel like the one thing that I really appreciated about like playing with you or being on like or having you as a coach is you've always brought out like everybody's like you've always enhanced everybody's like strengths to like the fullest potential. And like I feel like that's just such a good thing to have for a team, and I really enjoyed having you as a coach.
Yeah, it feels good when it works, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, even when it's not working, like I mean, even if like I hate calling it a rough year because like again, like we won a tournament and like we were still pretty good, but even in the like down parts of it, it's still so much better to like know that you're trying to like communicate and you're like trying to get there and like everyone is like believing. And I feel like that's something that like I never once doubted like anyone on that team. I never doubted like their intentions or their ability to try their best. Like I always felt like you were so helpful, and like even if there were times where you could tell like me or Sam or whoever were like stressed out, I feel like you still like you always like tried to get us there. And it I think like honestly morale got carried a lot by that, where like when we would start to have a good week, like I think it turned so quickly because you were so quick to bring up like I'm someone like I'll want to talk at the end of the game about like, oh, like what could we have done better? And you'd be like, well, let's also acknowledge like all the things that we did well, and like people's morale I feel like was constantly like saved a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think when I compared it to like when I was trying to work when I was miserable versus trying to work when like somebody was like it's not that bad or like things are going well.
Yeah.
Like it's easier to if you have someone keeping perspective in that way at least. And I think everyone on our team would like periodically just drop something in that I thought was like super helpful and amplifying that, even if like it would sometimes like fall to the wayside a little bit.
Yeah.
It was something for me to keep in mind because if they're bringing it up, it's something that they want to see improvement on. So if you can mention that those things are being worked on or things are changing in that way and acknowledge it, then people feel like they're engaged with it and nobody checks out. Well, that's the one thing I always feared on my teams is if anyone checked out, it's like it was a very quick process for them to no longer be there.
Yeah.
And I hated nothing more at any point in my life than like replacing people. It's the worst feeling in the world.
Yeah, it really is. It's awful.
It's so bad.
So anything in the world to prevent that from happening. And, I'm happy we got through that Dragons year where, everything stayed intact. I think we had a lot of good things and we just needed to iterate it on it a bit more. But I think we were like close to being where we wanted to be.
Yeah.
And I think that for me is like, that is fulfilling in that way, given, the trials and tribulations that came before it. I mean, it was good stuff. It really was.
Yeah. Is there anything else you guys have like in conclusion of this crazy adventure through the seasons.
Any admin stuff you want to know? We didn't really do that.
Oh yeah, true. Like, oh yeah, me and Mike were talking. Like, is it weird since you get to talk or not? Not well, yeah, you talk to everybody obviously, but like since you're there in the booth with all the teams, is it a weird perspective to have because you were a coach and player before? You're like, this is just like, do you ever feel like I shouldn't be here right now? Like in like moments of like people talking about stuff and stuff like that. Like how does that feel when you're like just adminning games and you're in the booth and stuff during SPL?
Yeah, I think at the beginning of last year, I think it was kind of weird. Like I think like people actually like did not want to talk about stuff when I was in the booth.
Mm-hmm.
They thought I would like leak it to other people. That was the impression I got because I'd come in and get like really silent. Like, you guys like need anything? You good? They'd be like, no, and they wouldn't like say anything until I left.
Well, that happened if they like played against us or something.
Yeah,
because you were yeah, that makes sense.
and against Titans, they didn't want to talk. But I think we've gotten past that because I think one thing that's sort of maybe a chip on my shoulder, but I feel like when I coached both you guys, like you guys wouldn't want to win that way anyway.
Yeah.
So I would never leak that stuff because
Never,
it would soil the effort that you'd put in to get there.
It just ruins like it just puts like
no one would ever,
like a mark on like the entire thing, and it's just not. It's like, what's the point even?
It would actually piss us off.
Yeah.
I think yeah.
So I would never do that. The one thing I've had to really learn, that's tough, is that if I'm like going into a booth, a lot of the times like people are talking about the things that the other team is concluding, and like I can always tell who's the step ahead. So I have to like
that's really interesting.
I have to be emotionless and not respond to the fact I'm like, haha, I know. You know?
That's so funny, actually.
Yeah. Because
like,
you know the game so well, so I'm sure you're just like...
And I am interested in it because I want to see how it plays out. And then also, like, I have my own conclusions about the game, and sometimes I'll hear teams, like, coming up with their strategy or their plan, and I'll hear something that, to me, is, like, an objectively wrong conclusion. I'll just go, like, you know, like, my eyebrows will go up, and then I'll just, you know, go back to sitting face. But learning to not react to what people are saying in a way that, you know, would be advantageous to someone else was something I had to really...
I would have never thought about that, but it makes so much sense.
Yeah, that's... And then, like, what about... Like, is it weird that you kind of have to... Like, not weird, but is it, like, be in charge of, like, all these teams and, like, making sure that everybody stays in line, like, behaviorally? You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure you're not a fan of having talks with people if they say something bad. You're like, you can't say that. Like, that has to suck, right? Being on that side.
I mean, I try to be reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, I think it's important to give benefit of the doubt in that people are not doing something intentionally that they know is wrong. Otherwise, you start to suspect and like put people on blast that don't deserve it. But there's stuff like, if people aren't getting here on time, or if like they're just like, you know, ignoring the things that I say, that I have to be more of a hard ass, and that is not my personality at all. So like it even comes out awkward.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I'm lucky in that most of the pro players are respectful of that and don't give me too much shit. So I'm thankful for that. I think my job would be a lot harder if it wasn't like this group of people, but it is, so it's not that bad.
Nice. Yeah, I feel like one thing that you've always done really well is like you never like. I feel like it's so easy. Like, I feel like everybody does it, but I feel like what you've done so well, like even when you were coaching, and I feel like you could apply it to like being an admin now, is like you'll never take sides on anything. Like with what, like if someone comes in with a point, like you'll hear out what everybody has to say, and you'll come to your own conclusion, and you just won't jump on, like you won't bandwagon off of somebody else's conclusion. Like you'll make your own, and then you'll be like, well, both you guys make sense, but like this is how it's gonna be or whatever. Like depending on like what the topic is. But I feel like you've always done a really good job of just hearing everybody out and just never taking one even if it's not like one person or one team side or whatever circumstance it is. You always have like a really good thought process in how to make sure that everybody feels like heard in a way.
Yeah, I mean, part of that's because I don't like being confrontational. So making sure everyone like gets their side of the story through, and then explaining how I got to my conclusion. Even if like people don't agree with my conclusion, they at least know that like I listened to and processed what they had to say. And if I can at least give a reason why I didn't land where they did, it makes it easier to go down, even if they don't necessarily agree with the response. And that was a lot of problem solving on my end, where like you need to be able to make like clear calls and make them, quickly, but you don't want to, because, we're going to make decisions sometimes that aren't necessarily 100% correct, but like the goal should be like 85 to 90% right. And if you can hit that, then, you're doing a good job. And I think once I stopped focusing on being always right all the time, it became a lot easier to be fluid in that way.
Like the one thing I always appreciated too is like when I talked to you was like we'd go for walks and we'd talk for like hours. Like we'd walk sometimes, like that one time we walked like 10 miles or whatever. We've had so many walks, like just at the apartment complex where we used to do like, I don't know how many laps, but we did a lot of laps and we would just be able to talk the entire time. And what I always really appreciated was that you'd always listen to everything that I'd have to say, like even if you didn't agree with me, like on certain things, and like you'd let me know after, but you'd always at least let me say it, and you'd never like be you wouldn't always like try to like make an excuse or like just like put your own like opinion for it. Like you would let me say what I want, and then like you would try to like get me to look at it a different way if I wasn't looking at it like the best way, or if you thought it's something different. And I always really appreciated that, and that's why I enjoyed talking to you so much.
Hell yeah. I like that. That's good.
You said it better than I could have, for sure.
That feels good. All right.
But yeah, do you have anything that you want to ask us, like, since we're here, or are you feeling pretty good about everything? Like, is there anything you're curious about that, like, after you were done coaching us, like playing in like further seasons, not like now, but like maybe like some of the other seasons or whatever?
No, I talk to you guys a lot, so I feel like
yeah.
I feel like I've gotten the ins and outs of that pretty well. I don't know. No, I think I'm pretty satisfied with where I'm at.
Okay. So, just for everybody watching, this is going to be on Mike's YouTube channel after this episode airs. So what's your YouTube again, Mike?
At PBM Smite.
And then it's also going to be on Spotify, and it's going to be inside the SPL. Like we said at the beginning of the episode, we don't have a name for the podcast yet. Kabam's recommendation, Travelers Proc. That is one we are considering.
We are Travelers Proc's fan.
Yeah,
Proc fans.
So we're gonna get a bunch of names. If there's like one that just sticks, like we said earlier, like we're gonna go with that one. But if we don't get one that we're like we have to be this, we're probably just gonna have a vote, and we're just gonna put up a bunch of names. We're not gonna like. There's so many comments right now. We are not gonna be the frontliners. We're not the frontliners.
It's gotta stop. It's awful. It's so bad.
Like I was talking to Mike yesterday about this. Aggro and Bara are mid and hunter. Me and Mike are supports. So we are not solo lane and support. Yeah. So we are not the frontliners. We would just be frontliner if it was that. So we are not happening. Yeah, we're not going to be that. Is there any? So what's your Twitter, Kabam?
No, I don't want anyone to follow.
You don't want anyone to follow you? All right,
I don't.
That's fine with me. I mean, is there anything else you want to add, Mike? Is there anything like your HUD competition or anything this week you got going on?
No, I would like everybody though, when they do see Kabam on the SPL broadcast, to let him like just say you hope he's having a good day. That's what I like to do. Whenever you come into our booth, I say, "How are you doing, Kabam?" I get the same answer every time. I'm not going to say what the answer is, but I do get the same answer every time.
You sure do.
But no, that's it. I think thanks to everybody for listening. Honestly, there's even more we could have gone, but we've just been going forever.
I wanted to talk so much more about season 5. Like we could have easily talked about season 5 for the entire episode.
Sub in for me for an episode. You guys could just go on about season 5. I'm sure you guys could take forever on that.
We could. That was
yeah. But no, that's it. Thanks everybody for watching. Hope everybody has a good week. We'll see you next week at Wednesday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern, right here on Auror's Twitch. And yeah, have a good